Secretary Wen, Mr. Gu asked you to bring a box of supplies to his hotel room. Wen Qingli was buying such things for the first time and hastily grabbed a box labeled, Enhanced Durability, before rushing to the presidential suite on the top floor of the Royal Court Hotel. That was Gu Tingyao's exclusive room. She knocked, and a man in a bathrobe opened the door, droplets of water still in his hair, the robe slightly open revealing toned abs. Just one glance made her throat dry, and she quickly handed him the bag. Mr. Gu, the items you requested. Before she could finish speaking, Gu Tingyao suddenly pulled her inside, shutting the door with a bang. The room was dark, and she found herself pressed against the wall, heart racing. Mr. Gu, are you okay? He didn't answer, breathing heavily near her ear. Help me. His breath was hot, and it felt like he was struggling with something. Mr. Gu. Before she could say more, he silenced her with a kiss. When Wen Qingli woke up, the sun was already up, and the man beside her was still asleep. As she moved, her body felt like it was falling apart. Remembering how she had begged him while crying last night, she regretted choosing that particular box. Once she felt a bit better, she quietly got out of bed and dressed. At the door, she looked back at the man, tall nose, handsome face, even in sleep exuding an unspoken pressure. He was the kind of man every young woman in the company desired, herself included, but she never thought she'd wake up in his bed. Back at her small rented apartment, after a shower and changing clothes, she headed to the office. Once at the top floor of Gu's group, an assistant rushed over, saying, Secretary Wen, be careful, Mr. Gu seems in a bad mood today. Memories of last night flooded her mind. Could it be about that incident? She bit her lip, got it. Then the intercom rang, and Gu Tingyao's cold voice came through, come to my office. Heart racing, she entered. Mr. Gu, you called for me. Someone tampered with last night's drinks, he said flatly. Investigate. She felt a chill. Last night, she sensed he had been drugged, and now it seemed confirmed. Understood, Mr. Gu. And find out who entered my room. Wen Qingli's face paled. He wanted her to investigate herself. If Gu Tingyao found out she had been in his bed, she'd likely be out of Gu's group. Secretary Wen. Gu Tingyao looked at her sharply. Daydreaming. Quickly collecting herself, she replied, I'll investigate right away. As she turned to leave, she felt his gaze piercing her back. After exiting, an assistant offered her a coffee. Secretary Wen, are you okay? She sipped and asked, what about Xiaoyu? Xiaoyu was the colleague who messaged her last night. Judging by Gu Tingyao's reaction, he seemed unaware of it. If he had been set up, he wouldn't have instructed anyone to deliver supplies beforehand. Xiaoyu hasn't come in today. Wen Qingli dialed Xiaoyu's number but found it off. A cold laugh escaped her. Xiaoyu had been with Gu Tingyao's assistant team for 2 years. It was surprising she'd been bribed to set them both up. She arranged for someone to track Xiaoyu and requested hotel surveillance footage. Soon, she learned the hotel cameras were down for repairs. This was expected. The mastermind wouldn't leave a trace. It seemed uncovering the puppet master would require some serious effort. Chapter 2, What are you so nervous about? In the afternoon, a representative from Shanghai International came to Gu's group to sign a contract with Gu Tingyao. The representative was a middle-aged man with an elegant demeanor, but he started off a bit greasy. Was last night's arrangement to your satisfaction, Mr. Gu? Last night? Gu Tingyao sneered. What arrangement? While others couldn't sense it, Wen Qingli could feel the pressure around Gu Tingyao beginning to drop dangerously. The representative, Li, hesitated before asking, that woman didn't go to your room? She was handpicked by our boss to ensure your satisfaction. At this, a cold glint appeared in Gu Tingyao's eyes. Oh really? He smiled, but it was more frightening than any frown. Anyone could see the immense anger radiating from him. Realizing their arrangements were unnecessary, Li quickly backtracked. Sorry, Mr. Gu, it was our mistake. We sincerely want to cooperate with Gu's group. Gu's group does not collaborate with unworthy individuals, Gu Tingyao said coldly. Secretary Wen, notify everyone to blacklist Shanghai International and its affiliates. We will never cooperate with them. Understood, Mr. Gu. Wen Qingli's back felt cold with fear, but she maintained a calm facade, though her palms were already sweating. It was clear that last night's events had genuinely angered Gu Tingyao. If he was this ruthless toward a partner, she couldn't imagine the consequences if he learned she was the one who spent the night with him. As Gu Tingyao left the meeting room, Li, unwilling to give up, tried to follow. Mr. Gu. Li, Mr. Gu's intentions are clear, Wen Qingli interjected. Li recognized her and pleaded, Secretary Wen, can you speak on our behalf? It was our mistake, and it won't happen again. This collaboration was just a step away. Could it really be ruined over last night's incident? Wen Qingli remained unmoved and gestured for him to leave. I'm sorry, please exit Gu's group. After years with Gu Tingyao, she understood his temperament. He was decisive and unyielding. Once he made a decision, it was unchangeable. After Li left, Wen Qingli prepared coffee in the break room and brought it to the president's office. Gu Tingyao had a habit of drinking hand-ground coffee when he was in a bad mood. But for her, every second felt excruciating. Upon entering, she saw Gu Tingyao sitting at his desk, reading documents, his gold-rimmed glasses adding an air of sophistication. You don't need to investigate that woman from last night, he suddenly said. If she was just a woman sent by Henghai International, he didn't care to know her identity after all. She wasn't someone with a clean background. Initially, he thought to reward the woman or take responsibility, but now knowing the situation, he saw no need. Wen Qingli was lost in thought when his words startled her, causing her to spill coffee on his pants. I'm sorry, Mr. Gu. Quickly grabbing some tissues, she knelt to clean it up. But a drop landed in a rather awkward spot, making it tricky to clean without feeling embarrassed. Gu Tingyao looked down at her, and suddenly memories of last night flashed in his mind, stirring a sense of familiarity. Secretary Wen, he called her. Before she could respond, he grasped her chin, making her look up at him. What are you so nervous about? His gaze seemed to pierce through her. Wen Qingli looked away, avoiding his eyes, and replied coolly, Mr. Gu, you misunderstood. I might not have rested well last night. I apologize, it won't happen again. Gu Tingyao didn't dwell on it. Millimeter, he replied, releasing her. Standing up, she quickly shifted into work mode. Mr. Gu, the hotel's surveillance footage is down. Since Representative Li acknowledged last night's arrangements in front of you, there is no need to destroy the footage. Someone else might have been behind the scheme to target you. Yes, Gu Tingyao agreed. Find out who is behind this. Wen Qingli's back stiffened, but her face remained calm. Understood. What about the woman who entered your room? Should we stop investigating? She asked, biting her lip. No need. Such casual women are hardly decent, Gu Tingyao replied dismissively, evident disdain in his eyes. Yes, Mr. Gu. Wen Qingli breathed a sigh of relief. Though labeled by Gu Tingyao, she felt a bit stifled, but as long as she could keep her job, this minor grievance was nothing. Chapter 3, Are you trying to sell me? After work, Wen Qingli received a call from home, urging her to return quickly. Upon entering, she was horrified to see several men beating her father. What are you doing? She shouted, let go of my dad. Hearing her voice, the men finally stopped. One of them spat at her father and leered, Hey, pretty lady, your dad owes us money and hasn't paid up. We're just giving him a little reminder he's lucky we're being so lenient. How much does he owe you? Wen Qingli asked, suppressing her anger. 880,000. Grinding her teeth, she pulled a bank card from her bag. There's 200,000 in here, my entire savings. Take it now, and I'll find a way to pay the rest later. The man took the card, flicking it with a sneer. Fine. I'll give you a week. If I don't see the rest of the money by then, your dad won't be walking anymore. Wen Qingli frowned, her fists clenched. After the men left, Wen Jianhua got up from the ground, cursing, those bastards. It was just a little loan, why go so far? I'm in agony. Dad. Wen Qingli's eyes were red. I told you to stop gambling. How did you end up owing 880,000? Over the years, she had helped pay off family debts, starting with just a few thousand, which ballooned like a snowball. Wen Jianhua's eyes darted around. I thought I could win back what I lost. Who could have imagined? You can't touch this stuff. You promised me you would quit. Wen Qingli was fed up with his gambling mindset. If it were that easy to recover losses, why was everyone working so hard? Oh, come on. You work for a big company, what is there to fear? You have to come up with 680,000 this week, or they really will kill me, he begged. Wen Qingli felt a throbbing in her temples. Getting 680,000 in a week. How was that possible? But she couldn't just stand by and watch her father get killed. Dad, this is the last time. I won't give you another penny for gambling debts, she said coldly. At that moment, a middle-aged woman walked in, having overheard their conversation. Tears in her eyes, she exclaimed, Qingli, what kind of talk is that? Your dad only has you if you don't care for him, who will? He can't quit gambling, and I don't have money to support him. The woman was Wen Qingli's stepmother, Lu Fang. Wen Qingli's mother had passed away due to illness, and her father had raised her, which was why she had always tolerated his faults. But now that his gambling debts were increasing, she felt powerless. Lu Fang's eyes darted as she suggested, You're so beautiful, making money should be easy. I have a friend who can set you up on a blind date. If it works out, they'll give us 600,000 as a dowry. When Jianhua's eyes lit up. That's great. Qingli. Are you trying to sell me? Wen Qingli asked coldly. Child, don't say such harsh things, Lu Fang said sternly. This is for your dad, isn't he it? Can you really bear to see him get beaten? If you cared, where were you when dad was being attacked? Lu Fang's expression froze. If you want to go on a blind date, do it yourself. Don't make plans with me. With that, Wen Qingli turned to leave. But just as she stepped away, she heard her father's wailing, Why is my life so hard? I raised my daughter with great difficulty, yet she just stands by as I get beaten. Wen Qingli's temples throbbed violently. Lu Fang stepped in at the right moment, Qingli, you're a dutiful daughter. I know you won't abandon your dad. Besides, a blind date doesn't mean it has to lead to marriage. Just meet him what if you like him. Wen Qingli sighed, exasperated. Chapter 4, She's very understanding. An hour later, when Qingli arrived at Huiyang Lanting. As soon as they heard she agreed to the blind date, they eagerly invited her out for dinner. Walking into the restaurant lobby, she spotted a middle-aged man with a plump face and a lecherous grin waving at her from a table by the window. Wen Qingli's face turned pale. She had suspected her stepmother wouldn't find her a decent match. If the man were any good, her stepmother would have sent her daughter instead of her. But she never expected it would be this appalling. She wanted to turn around and leave, but the man was already rushing over, his belly jiggling with each step. Ms. Wen, hello. I'm Li Dagang. I've been waiting for you. Come, sit down, I've already ordered. As he reached for her hand, Wen Qingli subtly dodged. Sorry, Mr. Li, I'm afraid we're not a match. I have to go now, she said, turning away. But Li Dagang chased after her. Wait, Ms. Wen. Earlier, he had seen her photo from Lu Fang and was instantly attracted. Although she was younger than his son, what did that matter? He could just pay a bit more in dowry. After all, once they were married, she'd be doing the housework, saving him the cost of hiring a maid. Now that he had seen her in person, he found her even more beautiful than in the photo. When Qingli hurried ahead, but Li Dagang insisted on blocking her path, growing agitated. What's your problem? You think 60,000 is too little? Seriously, you're overestimating yourself. If you're worth 60,000, how can you complain? When Qingli felt nauseous and didn't want to respond at all. Meanwhile, on the second floor, near a window, a young man noticed the commotion downstairs and turned to Gu Tingyao with a smile. Hey, guess who I just saw? Gu Tingyao barely lifted his eyelids, uninterested. Your beautiful secretary, he said dramatically. Looks like she's in a bit of trouble. Poor thing. Seeing Gu Tingyao's expression unchanged, he continued teasing, Are you going to leave the heroics to me? Back at the restaurant entrance, Li Dagang was still harassing Wen Qingli. Wen Qingli held back her disgust and politely said, Mr. Li, we really aren't suited for each other. But the man, humiliated and angry, grabbed her arm. Is that all you have to say? I spent over 2,000 on the food. You have to at least let me kiss you. Chapter 9 You are indeed making excuses. Ms. Du, have you ever heard of this saying? Wen Qingli said, You see others as you are. Wen Qingli didn't like to offend people, but Du Xian had been making things difficult for her again, and she couldn't let herself be bullied. I don't know if it's because of the light in the bathroom, but Du Xian's face turned a little blue. She sneered and said, I am the daughter of the Du family. I don't need to use any despicable means. I hope so. Wen Qingli said meaningfully. After saying that, she prepared to leave. But as soon as she passed by Du Xian, she heard Du Xian say, "Don't think that you are different just because you have been Gu Tingyau's secretary for a few years. What is his identity? What is your identity? Entering the Gu family is wishful thinking for you." Wen Qingli looked numb. She seemed to have heard Mrs. Gu say something similar yesterday. It's just that Mrs. Gu's words were obscure, while Du Xian was more straightforward. Why do they all think she is a potential threat? Obviously she had never had any wishful thinking. "Ms. Du, you worry too much," Wen Qingli said lightly. "Wen Qingli, can you guarantee that you don't have any improper thoughts about Gu Tingyao? Can you guarantee that there is nothing between you except a superior-subordinate relationship?" The scene of her and Gu Tingyao entangled in bed that night suddenly appeared in Wen Qingli's mind. His panting, the sweat on his forehead, and his fingers tightly clasped with hers. Du Xian did not miss Wen Qingli's moment of distraction. She sneered, "You are really quibbling." Wen Qingli suddenly turned around and asked her, "Ms. Du, where were you on the night of the 16th of this month?" A trace of panic suddenly flashed across Du Xian's face. But she quickly calmed down and said, "Is it necessary for me to report my whereabouts to you? Secretary Wen has no time to meddle in other people's business. He might as well think of a way to prove that he has not leaked company secrets." Wen Qingli smiled, then turned and left. Du Xian clenched his fingers into fists. Why did Wen Qingli ask her this? The 16th, wasn't it a few days ago? That night, she learned that Gu Tingyao was staying in the hotel, so she had evil thoughts. But in the end, she was delayed by something and couldn't go to Gu Tingyao's room. I don't know which woman got the advantage in the end. Wen Qingli mentioned that night in front of her. Could it be that he found out something? No, she must get Wen Qingli away from Gu Tingyao as soon as possible. Du Xian took out her cell phone from her bag and called Chen Fang. "How's it going?" Chen Fang on the other end of the phone said something, and Du Xian smiled with satisfaction, "Very good." After hanging up the phone, Du Xian left the bathroom and went directly to Gu Tingyao's office. Wen Qing was away handling some matters, so other assistants in the president's office passed the message on his behalf. After a while, the assistant came out and said with embarrassment, "Ms. Du, Mr. Gu said that he has nothing more to talk to you about. Please leave." Du Xian sneered and said, "Ask him about the matter related to Secretary Wen. Doesn't he want to hear it?" The young assistant went back into report and came out soon with an expression that was hard to describe. "What did he say?" "Boss Gu said that he doesn't need to hear about Secretary Wen from you." Du Xian was so angry that his eyes turned black. He didn't even bother to maintain his composure and left with a gloomy face. She couldn't even get into Gu Tingyao's office. Does she have to wait outside all the time? After all, Du Xian is the daughter of a wealthy family, and she cannot do such a shameful thing right now. After getting off the elevator, she took out her cell phone and made a call. "Aunt, are you free tonight? I heard that a new restaurant has opened, and I want to invite you to dinner. The sun sets." Wen Qingli took the cup and came to the door of the tea room. Several colleagues were chatting inside. "Have you heard? The new product has been leaked. How could we not know about such a big thing? Shanghai International stole our new product." "Hey, who leaked the information to Shanghai International? Who else could it be?" "Secretary Wen." "What? Impossible. I've heard it all." Wan Hong insisted that it was Secretary Wen who leaked the company's secrets. Even CEO Gu suspected her. "Secretary Wen usually looks so nice, I didn't expect him to be such a person. Then can she still keep her position as chief secretary? It's definitely impossible to protect it. Even if we don't find solid evidence, who can withstand the suspicion of the boss?" Wen Qingli held the coffee cup, his finger bones turning slightly white. Several colleagues came out of the tea room and were immediately frightened when they saw Wen Qingli standing there. No matter what, Wen Qingli is still the chief secretary and is not someone they can afford to offend. "Secretary Wen." Wen Qingli said nothing, went into the tea room to make a cup of coffee, and then returned to his seat. The GU group is so large that she has seen a lot of groundless rumors. She doesn't care what others say. Only. The working hours have passed and most of the people in the president's office have left. Wen Qingli picked up his phone and ordered 2 dinners. She has gotten used to it over the past 5 years. If Gu Tingyao doesn't come out of the office after get off work and doesn't have any other instructions, she will order dinner for him. Gu Tingyao had a picky taste, but she had already figured it out. Dinner was delivered promptly. When Wen Qingli entered the office to bring dinner to Gu Tingyao, she accidentally glanced at his computer screen. Above is a document of little importance. She was surprised. Gu Tingyao worked overtime just for this document. But she didn't think too much about it, so she put down her dinner and went out. Time passes by every second. Wen Qingli would occasionally look up from the computer screen and look towards Gu Tingyao's office door, and a feeling of bitterness would well up in her heart. If this matter is not investigated thoroughly, Gu Tingyao will probably always have doubts about her. Maybe I won't be able to keep this job. She once expected that she was different in Gu Tingyao's heart. But reality always shatters her fantasies and destroys all her delusions. She no longer dared to have any unrealistic thoughts. But if she was fired, especially on the charge of betraying the company, she would definitely not be able to find a good job again. How can she pay back Liang Shire's money? That was the down payment for Liang Shire's house. Wen Qingli took a deep breath and made up his mind. Not only does she have to prove that she wasn't the one who leaked the company's secrets, she also has to find the real traitor. Fortunately, she already had an idea. Chapter 10, Wish Wall. The hour hand is almost pointing to 10 o'clock. While Wen Qingli was packing up, Gu Tingyao came out of the office. Mr. Gu. Wen Qingli nodded slightly. Gu Tingyao responded indifferently. Wen Qingli wanted to wait until Gu Tingyao left before she left, but after taking 2 steps, he suddenly turned back and asked her, "Secretary Wen, is there anything else?" Wen Qingli was slightly stunned and said, "No." Then, she picked up her bag, followed Gu Tingyao to the elevator, and pressed the elevator button. When the two came out of the company together, they saw Gu Tingyao's driver had parked the car at the door waiting for him. Wen Qingli was about to say goodbye to him when he heard him say, "Get in the car." Are you sending her home? Or, did he want to test her in the car to see if she was the one who betrayed the company? Wen Qingli had a lot of thoughts in his mind, but he still walked obediently to the car. She wanted to sit in the passenger seat. But the driver opened the back door for her. Wen Qingli had no choice but to thank him and sit down. Soon, the door on the other side was opened. When the tall figure sat down, Wen Qingli's whole body was instantly filled with the scent of male hormones. She tried to clear her mind of those reveries and turned to look out the window. The driver started the car and heard Gu Tingyao say, "Send Secretary Wen back to the apartment first." "Okay, Mr. Gu." Wen Qingli said quickly, "It's okay for me, let's send Mr. Gu back first." Before she finished speaking, her heart skipped a beat when she met his deep eyes. He looked at her and said, "Your apartment is closer." Yes. Even though the two have been together for 5 years, there have been times when they have ridden in the same car together, but most of the time it was for business. But now, as night falls, the dim lights on the roadside add a bit of ambiguity to the atmosphere at this moment. Gu Tingyao sat next to Wen Qingli, and he could smell the faint fragrance on her. It's not that pungent perfume smell, it smells very nice. He suddenly felt that the smell was somewhat familiar. Yes, Wen Qingli has been his secretary for 5 years. But why, suddenly, did his mind flash back to that night when a woman held his fingers and begged him tenderly when he lost control of his strength? The woman's face was still blurry. But he had an indescribable feeling in his heart. At this moment, a "Gu" sound broke the silence in the car. Gu Tingyao glanced at Wen Qingli. Wen Qingli's face remained calm, but his ears were slightly red. She had no appetite at dinner tonight and ate very little. Who could have thought that my stomach would growl in Gu Tingyao's car? Now she just hoped that Gu Tingyao would pretend not to hear it. But Gu Tingyao not only pretended not to hear, but also asked, "Secretary Wen, are you hungry?" Wen Qingli wanted to jump out of the car, but she habitually answered calmly, "A little bit." Gu Tingyao raised his hand and looked at the watch on his wrist. It's past 10 o'clock. In their city, many stores close at 10 o'clock. He frowned slightly. Wen Qingli thought he disliked her. There happened to be a noodle shop in front of her that she often ate at. She quickly said to the driver, "Please stop in front of the noodle shop in front." The driver responded repeatedly. But Wen Qingli never expected that after the driver stopped the car, Gu Tingyao would actually get out with her, and then walk into the noodle restaurant together. Looking at the simple furnishings in the noodle shop, Wen Qingli felt nervous. This noodle shop is run by an elderly couple and is open until midnight. Sometimes when she was hungry at night, she would come here to eat a bowl of noodles. The store is not big, with only 6 tables and chairs inside. Although the store was very clean, where had Gu Tingyao ever been to such a small place to eat? Wen Qingli was worried that he would dislike her. Fortunately, there was no strange expression on Gu Tingyao's face. He and Wen Qingli sat down at a table together. The lady boss walked over to the table and said with a smile, "Xiao Wen is here again. Hey, do you have a boyfriend? Your boyfriend is so handsome." Wen Qingli's scalp tingled, and he quickly explained, "Boss lady, you misunderstood, this is my boss." Hearing this, the proprietress looked at Gu Tingyao strangely. Nowadays, does a boss still follow his subordinates to eat noodles near her house? But of course she would not voice her doubts, and only asked, "What would you like to eat?" "I'll just stay the same. Mr. Gu, please." "Same as you." Gu Tingyao said lightly. Wen Qingli added to the proprietress, "Don't add spicy or ginger." Gu Tingyao doesn't eat spicy food and doesn't like ginger either. She had already memorized these. "Okay, wait a moment." Perhaps because he was too handsome, the proprietress looked at him several more times before going to the kitchen. Wen Qingli took a look at the incredibly delicate features of the man opposite her, and thought to herself that it was not an exaggeration to say that a handsome man is a disaster. The noodles would take a while to cook, and Wen Qingli felt it was too awkward to remain silent, so he racked his brains to find a topic to talk about. "I come to this shop often, the food is delicious," she said dryly. "Yeah." Gu Tingyao responded indifferently. Wen Qingli felt that the atmosphere seemed to be more awkward than before. She was about to say something else when she suddenly heard Gu Tingyao ask, "What is that?" She followed Gu Tingyao's gaze. On the opposite wall, there was an area with a lot of colorful pieces of paper pasted on them, with different words written in different handwritings. Wen Qingli smiled and said, "The wish wall." In the past few years, the boss lady would give every customer who came to the store a piece of sticky note and ask them to write down their wishes on the paper without signing their names, and then stick it on the wall. Later, fewer people were willing to write, so the boss lady stopped doing this, but the wishes written by previous customers are still kept. Gu Tingyao stared at the wall for a while, then retracted his gaze and said lightly, "Childish." Wen Qingli was not surprised at all that Gu Tingyao would say this. In the eyes of the cold-hearted Mr. Gu, wishes are inherently childish. After all, he couldn't have any unfulfilled wishes. Gu Tingyao suddenly asked again, "Have you written it too?" Wen Qingli was stunned for a moment, and then his head suddenly made a buzzing sound. Of course she did. Moreover, a few years ago, she had written down several childish wishes that must not be seen by Gu Tingyao. However, there were so many sticky notes on it, it would be very difficult to find hers, and Gu Tingyao wasn't the type to stare at them. Wen Qingli breathed a sigh of relief and said, "No, every time I come here I just eat noodles and leave." Gu Tingyao didn't say anything else. "The noodles are coming." The proprietress brought over 2 bowls of noodles and 2 plates of side dishes and placed them on the table. "This is Xiao Wen's first time bringing people here, so this side dish is for you." "Thank you, Madam Boss." Wen Qingli smiled at the Madam Boss with curved eyebrows. Gu Tingyao looked at her smile and suddenly lost his mind for a moment. Chapter 11: Strengthening Security. He remembered that when she first joined the president's office of GU Group 5 years ago, she often smiled like this. At that time, he felt stupid and disgusted. But later, she smiled like this less and less often, and when he became her chief secretary, he never put such a smile on her face again. Her smiles were always respectful, polite, and distant. Only at this moment did he realize that he actually missed her once innocent smile. Wen Qingli picked up a pair of chopsticks and handed them to Gu Tingyao, then found that he was distracted. "Mr. Gu." She called him in confusion. Gu Tingyao quickly came to his senses and took the chopsticks as if nothing had happened. Even when eating noodles, he was extremely gentle and dignified. He ate quickly but his movements were very graceful. After eating, Wen Qingli wanted to pay the bill. Gu Tingyao scanned the code first. "Mr. Gu, let me do it," Wen Qingli said quickly. Since she brought him to the store, she should be the one to treat, right? However, Gu Tingyao ignored her and clicked the payment button directly. When the two men walked to the door of the store, a few men who had just drunk alcohol walked in. These men reeked of alcohol and staggered as they walked. One of them even looked at Wen Qingli with a very obscene look. Gu Tingyao's expression immediately turned cold. He stretched out his hand and pulled Wen Qingli behind him, and his tall body instantly covered her completely. Wen Qingli looked up at his back, a slight warmth running through her heart, but it was quickly replaced by bitterness. After leaving the noodle shop, Wen Qingli said to Gu Tingyao, "Mr. Gu, my apartment is just in front, so I'll go back first." Wen Qingli turned and walked towards the apartment. She didn't notice that after Gu Tingyao got in the car, the drunkard slipped out of the noodle shop again and followed her stealthily. "Hey, is this really okay for us? What's wrong with that? Didn't you see how pretty that girl was? Her figure is top-notch too, wow. I feel like my body is on fire just by looking at her. Har har, if I can sleep with her just once, it would be worth it even if I die." Seeing that Wen Qingli was about to enter the apartment building, these drunkards quickened their pace. However, at this moment, a group of people who looked like bodyguards suddenly rushed out from nowhere, covered their mouths, dragged them to a remote place, and beat them up. Stop fighting, stop fighting. Please forgive me, I won't dare to do it again." After a long time, until they were beaten to the point where they could hardly get up, the bodyguards finally stopped. A young handsome man in black sports was stepped on the face of a drunkard. "Some people are not something you can touch, understand?" We understand, we understand. We were just bewildered for a moment, and we won't dare to do it again." The handsome young man kicked him hard again and left with the other bodyguards. Soon, he walked to a car on the side of the road. The car window rolled down, and the person sitting inside was Gu Tingyao. "Boss Gu, everything has been handled," Yinbei said, secretary when has safely entered the apartment building. Gu Tingyao responded and said, "Go on by this apartment building." Yinbei was slightly stunned, then asked, "What happens after the acquisition?" "Enhanced security." After saying this, Gu Tingyao rolled up the car window. The light reflected on the car window, revealing Yinbei's stunned expression. The driver started the car and asked, "Mr. Gu, are we going back to the villa in Nanshanbei?" "Go back to the old house." The driver thought to himself, the old house and the apartment where Secretary Wen lives are in two completely opposite directions. How can this be considered a convenient route? In the flower hall of the Gu family's old house, Mrs. Gu was sitting by the window with a cup of rose tea in her hand. The heat lingered, as if a mist had covered her eyes. "Madam, Mr. Gu is back," said the servant standing at the door. "Well, let him come over." Soon, Gu Tingyao's tall figure appeared at the door of the flower hall. Mrs. Gu turned to look at him and said with a smile, "It's rare for you to come back. Nanshanbei is close to the company." Gu Tingyao said concisely as he walked to sit down opposite Mrs. Gu. Mrs. Gu said meaningfully, "Really? I guess you don't want to come back and hear me nagging." Gu Tingyao said without raising his eyebrows, "If you think so, then it is." Mrs. Gu was so angry that she laughed. After a while, she asked, "Is there anything going on in the company recently? Haven't you stopped asking about the company's affairs?" "I'm just asking. Did someone tell you something?" Gu Tingyao's eyes suddenly became sharp. Mrs. Gu actually felt a little guilty when her own son looked at her. She coughed twice and said, "Such a big thing happened, and you still want to hide it from me." "It's not a big deal," Gu Tingyao said lightly. "A new product is not a big deal. But if there is a traitor in the company, it will cause endless troubles." Mrs. Gu said, "Ayao, you have to think this matter through. I've sent someone to check it out." "Who should check it?" "Secretary Wen." Gu Tingyao remained silent. Mrs. Gu took a sip of the scented tea and said, "I know that Secretary Wen has been with you for a long time, so it's normal for you to trust her. But, after all, you are just a superior and a subordinate, and you can't guarantee that she won't betray you when faced with the temptation of interests." After saying that, Mrs. Gu put down her teacup, picked up her cell phone, tapped a few times, and then placed it in front of Gu Tingyao. Gu Tingyao looked puzzled. Soon, he heard a familiar voice coming from the phone. "Madam, you think too highly of me. How could I possibly interfere with Mr. Gu's decision?" This is Wen Qingli's voice. He had heard this voice countless times in 5 years. "You will never hear it wrong. Then came Mrs. Gu's voice, "There is 1 million in here." Gu Tingyao frowned suddenly and looked at Madame Gu unhappily. Mrs. Gu smiled slightly and motioned for him to continue listening. "I know very well that the relationship between Mr. Gu and I is just that of a superior and a subordinate. It has always been like this and it will always be like this in the future." Wen Qingli's voice was cold and without a trace of emotion. "Some people just want to cut off ties with him." Gu Tingyao tapped his index finger on the table. Mrs. Gu is his mother, so she naturally knows that he will do this little trick when he is unhappy. "Well, take the money. Consider it a reward for your dedication and diligence by Yaro's side." The recording stops here. Mrs. Gu took the phone back and said, "I thought Secretary Wen had feelings for you, so I wanted to ask her out for a chat, but I didn't expect her to be so tactful. It's just that." "Did she take the money?" Gu Tingyao suddenly asked. Chapter 12. I'll go to your company to make trouble. What do you think? Mrs. Gu smiled slightly, but don't blame her. Maybe she accepted my money just to make me feel at ease. Gu Tingyao understood what Mrs. Gu meant. She gave money to Wen Qingli because she wanted to use money to buy Wen Qingli's obedience. By accepting the money, Wen Qingli was promising Madame Gu that she would never. Gu Tingyao suddenly felt very irritated. Don't blame her. It's hard for most people to resist the temptation of money. Mrs. Gu said with a smile. Gu Tingyao said nothing, his face gloomy. It's just. Madame Gu changed the subject. If she can take my money behind your back, can she also take other people's money behind your back? Yao, don't trust others too much. Sometimes, it's better to be on guard. Gu Tingyao stood up and said in a cold voice, don't worry about my affairs. But you, don't trust everyone. It's better to have less contact with some people. Hearing this, Mrs. Gu's face didn't look very good either. But Gu Tingyao had already turned and left. In the morning, when Qingli was awakened by the ringing of his cell phone. Worried it was something about work, she barely even opened her eyes before answering the phone. Hello. Qingli. The voice of stepmother Lu Fang came from the other end of the phone. When Qingli frowned in disgust, and his sleepiness disappeared for the most part. What's up? Look, didn't you have someone beat up Mr. Li last time? He's still in the hospital now. Lu Fang said awkwardly, he keeps asking us to pay for the medical expenses, but your father and I don't have any money. Don't he know why he was beaten? When Qingli asked coldly. Oh, no matter what, you can't beat him up like that. He said yesterday that if we don't pay him back, he'll sue us. Your dad just paid off his gambling debts, and now Mr. Li wants to sue him again. He's so scared that he doesn't know what to do. Before Wen Qingli could say anything, Wen Jianhua's angry voice was heard on the other end of the phone again. You unfilial daughter, you don't want to take care of me anymore, right? Wen Qingli felt icy cold inside. She had just helped Wen Jianhua pay off hundreds of thousands of gambling debts. But Wen Jianhua didn't take it seriously at all. Your mother kindly asked you to go on a blind date, and it would be fine if you didn't appreciate it, but... My mother died a long time ago. Wen Qingli interrupted him coldly. Wen Jianhua seemed to be stunned for a moment, and then cursed Wen Qingli in a very unpleasant way. I'm telling you, you must come to the hospital in person to apologize to Mr. Li, otherwise, I will go to your company and make trouble. I want everyone in your company to know that you are a person who does not respect your parents. Wen Qingli's expression was very ugly. You are crazy. I am crazy. Who told me to have such a heartless daughter like you? When you were 12 years old and had a high fever, I stayed by your side for 2 days and 2 nights. Have you forgotten about it? Anyway, I'm putting it here. Don't think I don't know where your company is. It's the GU Group. After saying that, Wen Jianhua hung up the phone. Wen Qingli held the phone in his hand, clenching his teeth. After so long, she knew very well how shameless Wen Jianhua was. If she didn't do what he wanted, he would really go to GU Group and make a scene. If that were the case, she would have no face to stay in the GU Group. When Qingli got up and went to the bathroom, washing his face with cold water. It just so happens that today is Saturday and we have a holiday. She had planned to go to the company to work overtime. But now it seems that she has to go to the hospital first. After she arrived at the hospital, she asked which ward Li Dagang was in, then took the elevator to the inpatient department. As soon as she got out of the elevator, she ran into Lu Fang. Qingli, you're here at last. Lu Fang looked at her in surprise. "I've been waiting for you." Wen Qingli gave her a cold look and walked away. LV Fang didn't seem to feel her coldness. She followed her closely and said, "Mr. Li has a bad temper, but is not a bad person. Qingli, you should apologize to him later. Although your father's gambling debts have been paid off, it's a good thing for you to develop a relationship with him." When Qingli stopped suddenly, Lu Fang almost couldn't break. "Qingli, what's wrong?" When Qingli laughed sarcastically, "Since Mr. Li is so nice, why don't you let your daughter go on a blind date with him?" Lu Fang said awkwardly, "Look at what you said. Your sister is still young, and I treat you as my own daughter. Of course, I will think of you when there is something good." When Qingli was too lazy to listen to her hypocritical words and continued walking towards Li Dagan's ward. When she was 10 years old, Lu Fang entered her home and brought a sister who was 2 years younger than her. Their mother and daughter acted innocent in front of Wen Jianhua and other relatives and friends, but secretly tortured her with all kinds of petty means. Wen Qingli tried to complain, but no one believed her. They all said that Lu Fang was a good stepmother and accused Wen Qingli of being ignorant. Especially Wen Jianhua, he loves Lu Fang's daughter more than her. From then on, Wen Qingli never relied on anyone again. She studied very hard, and after being admitted to university, she moved out on her own. But Wen Jianhua became addicted to gambling again, and every now and then he would ask her to pay off various gambling debts. When Wen Qingli came to her senses, she was already standing at the door of Li Dagan's ward. She didn't bother to knock on the door, so she just pushed it open and walked in. When she walked in, she almost laughed out loud. Li Dagang was wrapped up like a mummy. There was no gauze on his face, but he looked bruised and swollen, which was quite funny. As soon as Li Dagang saw Wen Qingli, he immediately became furious. "Bitch," he cursed, "pay me the medical expenses. Or I'll sue you to death." Wen Qingli sat down slowly beside Li Dagang's bed. "I can compensate you for your medical expenses, but there are some things I need to explain to you first." "What else do you have to say?" Li Dagang wanted to sit up excitedly, but accidentally pulled the wound on his body, causing him to grimace in pain. "You harassed me in broad daylight. The surveillance video at the hotel entrance captured it clearly. How long do you think you'd have to stay in jail for if I sued you?" Wen Qingli said calmly. Li Dagang was stunned for a moment, then quickly said, "Bullshit. You call that harassment? I didn't do anything to you at all." "Really? How about this, we hire lawyers to sue each other and see who wins in the end. What do you think?" Wen Qingli smiled and was not panicked at all. Li Dagang was indeed feeling guilty, and hesitating for a long time without being able to utter a single word. Wen Qingli sneered in his heart. In recent years, she has seen many people like Li Dagang. Strong on the outside but weak on the inside, appearing fierce but actually cowardly. Just make up some random things and you can scare him. Think about it carefully. Either we sue each other, or you stop harassing me and my family from now on." Wen Qingli said coldly. Li Dagang was somewhat unwilling, but he thought that he really wanted to kiss Wen Qingli that day, and if he had to hire a lawyer to fight a lawsuit, it would be time-consuming and costly. If he lost the case in the end, wouldn't he suffer a great loss? Just then, Wen Qingli's cell phone rang. She took out her cell phone and saw that it was a call from Gu Tingyao. She answered immediately, "Mr. Gu." Hearing this name, Li Dagang's pupils trembled violently. Chapter 13. You're not planning to protect Secretary Wen, are you? Come to the company right away. Gu Tingyao's voice was cold. "Okay, I understand." Wen Qingli had just hung up the phone when Li Dagang asked, "Mr. Gu? You're the guy who had someone beat me up that day. I heard you call him that day. What kind of company does he run?" "Mr. Gu." "Wen Qingli. What's that look in your eyes? You? Didn't Lu Fang tell you about my job?" Wen Qingli interrupted him. Li Dagang frowned. "What's your job?" After he finished speaking, his face suddenly changed, and he asked anxiously, "Wait a minute, the Mr. Gu you are talking about, could it be?" "I am the chief secretary of the president of Gu Group," Wen Qingli said lightly. Upon hearing her words, Li Dagang's face turned pale immediately, which looked even funnier with his bruised face and nose. Wen Qingli didn't bother to talk nonsense with him anymore. He had already scared her before, so she turned around and left. "Ms. Wen, please don't leave. I was wrong before." Wen Qingli didn't even turn her head. Li Dagang was anxious to chase her, but because he was still injured, he was not careful and rolled off the bed. "Hey, Mr. Li, what's wrong with you?" Lu Fang walked in from outside, and when he saw him like this, he was immediately shocked and hurried over to help him up. Li Dagang slapped her hard in the face. "Bitch! Why didn't you tell me that your stepdaughter was Mr. Gu's person? You're going to kill me." On the subway, Wen Qingli's mind was racing with various countermeasures. As Gu Tingyao's chief secretary, she often worked overtime on weekends. But just now, Gu Tingyao's voice sounded wrong. He seems angry. In addition, too many things happened during this period of time, so Wen Qingli had to be on guard. Arriving at the door of Gu Tingyao's office, Wen Qingli took a deep breath and raised his hand to knock on the door. "Enter." After Wen Qingli pushed the door open, he discovered that there was not only Gu Tingyao in the office, but also Du Xian and Fei Fei. However, there was no surprise on her face, she just walked to Gu Tingyao's desk as usual. "Mr. Gu." Gu Tingyao glanced at her coldly, then glanced at Du Xian. Du Xian smiled slightly and said, "Secretary Wen, if you don't want others to know about some things, you'd better not do them yourself." Wen Qingli didn't say anything, and Du Xian winked at Fei Fei again. Fei Fei had a conflicted look on her face. Gu Tingyao tapped his index finger on the desk again and again, his face grim. "Do you think my time can be wasted casually?" Fei Fei shrank back and said quickly, "No, Mr. Gu, I just can't bear it. She has betrayed the company, do you still want to hide it for her?" Du Xian sneered, "People like her may not be grateful to you." Fei Fei took a deep breath. When she met Wen Qingli's indifferent gaze, she suddenly felt a little panicked. But when she thought of Du Xian's promise to her, she gritted her teeth and said to Gu Tingyao, "Boss Gu, I accidentally heard Secretary when making a phone call in the stairwell that day. I heard her talk about a new product and said that she could give it to the other party, but she had to get a large sum of money." Du Xian chuckled twice and said, "I'm sorry, Secretary Wen, I didn't expect to find the key witness so quickly." Wen Qingli said, "So, Miss Du wants to convict me based on Fei Fei's testimony alone. It's already this time, Secretary Wen, you still want to quibble? It's strange that you suddenly got a large sum of money to pay your father's gambling debts, and now there is Fei Fei's testimony. Isn't it a foregone conclusion that you betrayed the GU group?" Du Xian looked at Gu Tingyao again and said, "Boss Gu, at this point, you are not still planning to protect Secretary Wen, are you?" Gu Tingyao ignored her and just stared at Wen Qingli. "Fei Fei, are you sure you really heard me say this on the phone?" Wen Qingli asked calmly. Fei Fei said confidently, "I'm sure. Because I felt strange at the time, I kept thinking about it for a long time. I definitely won't remember it wrong. Secretary Wen, I know you usually take care of me, but this is related to the interests of the company, so I can only apologize to you." Wen Qingli suddenly laughed. Her smile made Fei Fei's heart suddenly panic. Du Xian was also a little uneasy. She could only cover it up by scolding loudly, "What are you laughing at? You have caused such serious losses to the two companies. How can you compensate them? Ms. Du, if you don't want others to know, then don't do it. I'll return this sentence to you." After saying that, Wen Qingli took out his cell phone, found a picture, and placed it in front of Gu Tingyao. "Mr. Gu, at 3:36 yesterday afternoon, there was suddenly an extra 500,000 yuan in Fei Fei's mother's bank account." Wen Qingli said word by word, and the sender was Liu Yang, the assistant Miss Du hired 3 days ago. Du Xian's body shook. Fei Fei was visibly panicking. I didn't know about this." Fei Fei tried to argue. She never thought that Wen Qingli would actually check on her. It was clear that Du Xian's special assistant Chen Fang found her and told her about the plan yesterday, and only yesterday afternoon did he have someone transfer the money to her mother's account. How did Wen Qingli find out about this so quickly? Could it be that Wen Qingli had already thought that she might be bribed by Du Xian? So she started checking yesterday. How is this possible? Gu Tingyao lowered his eyes and stared at the picture in Wen Qingli's phone for a while, then suddenly laughed. Fei Fei thought he was laughing because he was angry, and she was very panicked. But Du Xian inexplicably felt that Gu Tingyao seemed to be in a good mood. "Ms. Du said that I got a large sum of money because I was bribed by someone else. Then I want to ask, what did Ms. Du want to do by transferring a large sum of money to Fei Fei?" Du Xian gritted his teeth secretly. To be honest, she knew that this was not a very secretive thing to do. But she felt that as long as Fei Fei stood up to expose the matter, Wen Qingli would definitely be kicked out of Gu's group. By then, even if Wen Qingli found out about the matter, no one would care what she said. In fact, Wen Qingli would not have the opportunity to appeal to Gu Tingyao. But Wen Qingli actually exposed it on the spot. This woman. Du Xian also wanted to argue like Fei Fei, but she knew that it was useless to argue now. She could only save some face in front of Gu Tingyao and Wen Qingli. Do I need to report to you when I transfer money to her? Du Xian said coldly, Boss Gu, I see that you don't seem to believe what we say. Since you insist on protecting Secretary Wen, I have nothing more to say. Goodbye. Du Xian stood up and was about to leave, but heard Gu Tingyao's cold voice, Stop. Chapter 14, The Possessiveness is Too Strong. Du Xian's feet seemed to be rooted to the ground, unable to move. Ms. Du, this drama didn't end very well. Gu Tingyao said coldly. Cold sweat gradually broke out on Du Xian's back. Gu Tingyao looked at Fei Fei again. Fei Fei's legs suddenly went weak and she almost fell to the ground. Mr. Gu, I know I was wrong. Fei Fei said in a crying voice. She is not someone who can handle pressure. So my mentality is about to collapse at this moment. I'm not the one you should apologize to. Fei Fei quickly looked at Wen Qingli again and pleaded, Secretary Wen, I was just bewildered for a moment. I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. This was all done by Miss Du. Du Xian gritted his teeth, turned around, and slapped Fei Fei hard. How dare you slander me? Wen Qingli watched the two of them fighting each other coldly, without any ripples in his heart. Gu Tingyao frowned slightly, as if he was fed up with the scene before him. Please don't appear in front of me again, Miss Du, whether it's for official or personal matters. Gu Tingyao's eyes were filled with indifference and disgust. I will let everyone know that any company that dares to hire you is an enemy of me, Gu Tingyao. Gu Tingyao. You. Du Xian never expected that he would be so merciless to her. After all, she was the daughter of the Du family. She could have lived a carefree life with fine clothes and delicious food. For him, she went to work for Wan Hong, but now he actually expressed his dislike for her so bluntly. Although she has the support of the Du group and does not really need other companies to hire her, but Gu Tingyao's words are equivalent to letting everyone know that she has offended Gu Tingyao. Maybe it will have an impact on the Du group as well. Gu Tingyao asked Wen Qingli again, how is your investigation going? We have already found some clues. Wen Qingli said, the new product was not leaked from Gu Group. I can guarantee that. Du Xian's heart skipped a beat. Did you hear that, Miss Du? Gu Tingyao sneered, go back and tell Wan Hong to investigate their traitor thoroughly. Don't let us find out who they are. If we do, Wan Hong will not only lose face. Du Xian felt a lump in his throat. She knew she couldn't stay here any longer today, otherwise she would only lose her composure even more. She had to go back and think about a solution. After Du Xian left, Fei Fei was frightened to the point of being at a loss. I'll leave her to you. Gu Tingyao said to Wen Qingli. Wen Qingli nodded and let Fei Fei go out first. Fei Fei had no choice but to leave in panic. Gu Tingyao and Wen Qingli were the only ones left in the office. Wen Qingli didn't say anything, nor did he leave. Because she could see that Gu Tingyao had no intention of letting her go. After a while, Gu Tingyao said in an ambiguous tone, you are well prepared. She knew what he meant. For some reason, Wen Qingli felt a tightness in his chest. She said, yesterday I accidentally saw Chen Fang talking to Fei Fei. In fact, even if she hadn't seen it, she would have been more careful about this. The look on Du Xian's face made it clear that he was coming for her. So there is a high possibility that he is targeting the people around her. She has seen a lot of such dirty tricks in the workplace in the past 5 years. Du Xian still underestimated her. The reason she was able to take the position of Gu Tingyao's chief secretary was not because of her pretty face. However, if she didn't find the transfer records, would Gu Tingyao believe what Fei Fei and Du Xian said? He asked her to come over today because he had some doubts about her in his heart, right? Is Secretary Wen always so well prepared for everything? Gu Tingyao suddenly asked. Wen Qingli was unsure what he meant, so he asked, what does Mr. Gu mean? Gu Tingyao suddenly stopped talking again. But Wen Qingli could feel that there was a low pressure emanating from his whole body. Thinking about it now, the scene of the two of us eating noodles in the noodle shop last night really seemed like a dream. At that time, she had an illusion that the two of them were in the same world. But now, he was sitting in front of her, but she felt that he was very far away from her. Nothing. After a while, Gu Tingyao said, "You go first, and accompany me to a dinner party tonight." I see. This dinner was not on the itinerary that Wen Qingli knew about. But since Gu Tingyao said so, she couldn't refuse. After leaving Gu Tingyao's office, Wen Qingli did not leave, but sat at his workstation. Since she was already here, she might as well take care of some work. Fei Fei walked up to her and said carefully, "Secretary Wen, what happened just now was really not what I wanted to do. Miss Du's assistant suddenly found me and asked me to do this kind of thing, and I didn't dare to refuse." Wen Qingli didn't want to pay attention to her now, so he said, "You go back first." Fei Fei wanted to say something else. But seeing the hidden anger between Wen Qingli's eyebrows, she didn't dare to speak and had to leave silently. Wen Qingli did not leave, and Gu Tingyao did not come out of the office either. The two of them stayed in the company together for a day. But there was no communication during that time. It was not until dusk that Gu Tingyao came out of the office. He glanced at Wen Qingli, and then walked towards the elevator. Wen Qingli quickly packed his things and followed. When they arrived at the place, Wen Qingli discovered that this was a private club where Gu Tingyao often gathered with his friends. This private club was opened by Gu Tingyao's childhood friend Ji Hanju. Wen Qingli had been here before, but she only came to deliver something to Gu Tingyao. After handing the things to the waiter, she left. This was the first time she actually followed Gu Tingyao in. After entering the private room, the noisy crowd quieted down when they saw her behind Gu Tingyao. There was a flash of surprise in the eyes of many men. If she hadn't been brought here by Gu Tingyao, I'm afraid these men would have taken action. But the silence was only for a moment. Soon, Ji Hanju came over and said with a smile, "Secretary Wen is here today too. What a rare guest." Wen Qingli smiled and nodded and greeted, "Master Ji. Hey, why are you being so polite? It's like we're strangers. Just call me by my name. My name is Hanju, Ji Hanju." After Ji Hanju finished speaking, he stared at Wen Qingli with his sharp eyes, as if he was really waiting for her to call his name. Wen Qingli was just about to politely refuse when she heard Gu Tingyao say coldly, "Why, are you very familiar with her?" Ji Hanju curled his lips and said, "We've met many times, how can we not be familiar with each other? Yao, I just want Secretary Wen to call me by my name, but you're so unhappy. Your possessiveness is too strong. Secretary Wen can't call you by your full name." Wen Qingli. She didn't feel embarrassed when Ji Hanju asked her to call her name just now, but now, her face felt slightly hot. Gu Tingyao ignored Ji Hanju and walked straight to the sofa and sat down. "Come here," he said to Wen Qingli. Wen Qingli sat down next to him. But she still didn't understand in her heart. What did he bring her here for? He said he was attending a dinner party, but it was clearly not that, it was just a gathering among friends. There were a few female public relations people in the private room. When they saw Gu Tingyao coming, they were all eager to make a move. But when they saw Wen Qingli sitting next to Gu Tingyao, they had to suppress their thoughts temporarily. Chapter 15 How different are you from them? But when they saw Wen Qingli sitting next to Gu Tingyao, they had to suppress their thoughts temporarily. "I've heard for a long time that a Yao has a beautiful secretary. We've only seen her from afar before. Today, a Yao finally brought her out to show us." A man named Ding Yuankai said with a smile. Everyone was already there, so they started having fun. Most of the men in the private rooms were accompanied by a female public relations officer, who would pour wine, light cigarettes, massage shoulders and legs, and occasionally there would be some slightly erotic scenes. Wen Qingli watched a man win a card game and casually kissed the female public relations officer next to him on the lips. She frowned slightly and looked away. Just then, she heard Gu Tingyao's voice beside her. "Pour the wine." Wen Qingli's back stiffened. She turned to look at Gu Tingyao beside her. His face flickered under the light in the private room and was not very clear. He brought her over, asked her to sit next to him, and asked her to pour the wine. Was this telling her that in his eyes, she was the same as those female PR girls? Wen Qingli felt her blood running a little cold. She poured a glass of wine almost instinctively and handed it to Gu Tingyao. Maybe she was overthinking it. Maybe Gu Tingyao just asked her to pour the wine. However, Wen Qingli's hands were shaking slightly. At this moment she was glad that she was calm enough. At least that's what it looks like. Gu Tingyao reached out to take the wine glass, and his cold fingertips brushed across her hand, chilling Wen Qingli's heart. He drank the glass of wine in one gulp. Wen Qingli poured him another glass like a robot. After Gu Tingyao drank 3 cups in a row, Wen Qingli was about to pour him more, but he suddenly raised his hand and put his arm around her shoulders, and with a little force, he pulled her into his arms. At this moment, their bodies were pressed tightly together. As if with evil fun, he put his lips close to her ear and said, "Secretary Wen, is it so painful to pour me a glass of wine?" His breath was hot, but his tone was cold. The alternation of cold and heat made Wen Qingli feel as if he had lost his soul. However, she tried her best to remain calm, just like she was reporting to him at other times, and said in a serious tone, "Boss Gu, you must be joking." Before she finished speaking, Gu Tingyao's hand on her waist suddenly tightened. "Secretary Wen, this is not the company, and I'm not asking you to talk to me about work. Can you please not use such a rigid tone?" After saying that, Gu Tingyao looked aside and said, "Can't you learn from them?" Wen Qingli followed his gaze and his face turned pale instantly. He was looking at those female PR girls. The female public relations women snuggled up to the men, talking and laughing with charming voices. He asked her to learn from them. She was wrong. She just thought that in Gu Tingyao's eyes, she was the same as those female public relations. Little did she know that in his eyes, she was not even as good as them. "What's wrong, Secretary Wen? Do you look down on them?" Gu Tingyao looked at her face and sneered, "We are all here to make money. How big is the difference between you and them?" Wen Qingli's eyes were already a little red. However, under the lighting in the private room, it is hard to see. She tried her best to keep her voice from choking. "Boss Gu, did I do something wrong? Hasn't she already proven her innocence regarding the new product leak?" Judging from the look on Gu Tingyao's face, he probably didn't believe Du Xian. Then why did he do this? "Secretary Wen, what do you think?" Gu Tingyao snorted and laughed. "My secretary Wen is so smart, I think you should be able to guess it." What happened that night suddenly flashed through Wen Qingli's mind. Could it be that Gu Tingyao knew? He clearly said there was no need to investigate the woman that night anymore. But, he was really abnormal today. Could it be that he really knew that the woman who entered his room that night was her, so he humiliated her like this, meaning that she climbed into his bed and behaved just like those female public relations women? Gu Tingyao clearly felt the stiffness in Wen Qingli's body. His eyes darkened a little. She really feels guilty. Har har, you dared to take his mother's money, and now you feel guilty. Gu Tingyao really didn't understand. If she needed money, she could just ask him. But she would rather take Mrs. Gu's money than tell him a word. What does she think of him in her heart? Gu Tingyao became even angrier. Although he couldn't clearly explain what was mixed in his anger. Wen Qingli dug his nails into the palm of his hand to make himself more awake. Just as she was about to say something, Ji Hanju ran over. "Ayao, you came out to party with us, but you're being sweet with Secretary Wen here, leaving us aside. Isn't that a bad idea?" As a result of his interruption, Wen Qingli took the opportunity to get out of Gu Tingyao's arms and sit up straight. "That's right." The others also followed suit. "Ayao, come over and play cards with us. Why don't you bring Secretary Wen along? You finally brought her out to play once, why don't you let us play a few games with her?" A man stood up from his seat and said, "Come on, Yao. I'll give you my seat." Gu Tingyao glanced at Wen Qingli and asked, "Do you want to play?" Wen Qingli doesn't want to play. She was tired and she wanted to leave. However, Gu Tingyao's tone clearly did not allow her to refuse. She could only say woodenly, "Listen to Mr. Gu. Then come over." Gu Tingyao stood up and walked towards the card table. Wen Qingli followed behind him. Ji Hanju noticed that the atmosphere between the two people was not right and felt puzzled. What's wrong with Gu Tingyao and his secretary? Wait, why is that so strange, having a quarrel with his secretary? As a boss, if the secretary is not satisfied with her work, he should just tell her directly. Why is he doing this now? Just like a couple having a quarrel. Realizing this, Ji Hanjo's lips curled up into a mysterious smile. Gu Tingyao walked to the seat the man gave him and sat down. The female public relations officer next to the man was also very considerate and gave her seat to Wen Qingli. At this point, there was no point for Wen Qingli to worry about those things anymore. She sat down next to Gu Tingyao without hesitation. A female public relations officer said with a smile, "Secretary Wen is so pretty. You have made all of us sisters look better now that you are here." Her original intention was to flatter Wen Qingli. But as soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly felt Gu Tingyao's cold gaze sweeping over. She was startled. The man next to her quickly scolded, "What nonsense are you talking about? Do you think you can compare yourself to Secretary Wen?" The female public relations officer felt a little aggrieved. "Get out now. Get someone else." The female PR officer didn't dare to offend the people in the private room, so she had to get up and run out feeling aggrieved. She walked while wiping her tears and bumped into a slender figure. Oops. Hearing this voice, the female public relations officer quickly looked up and apologized. "I'm sorry, Sister Mu, I didn't mean it." Mu Xiar straightened her clothes and said, "It's okay, but what's wrong with you? Why are you so irritable? I remember, didn't you go to young Master Ji's private room to entertain guests?" When talking about this, the female PR started to wipe her tears again. "Yes, today Mr. Gu came with his secretary, and I thought about saying a few nice words to please his secretary, but I don't know what I said wrong, and I was kicked out." A strange look flashed across Mu Xia's eyes. "Boss Gu brought a secretary. Which secretary? I heard others call her Secretary Wen." Mu Xia immediately understood. She patted the female public relations officer on the shoulder and comforted her. "It's nothing serious, don't think too much. Sister Mu, are you going to Master Ji's private room? Can you say a few good words for me?" Mu Xia was indeed going to that private room. She is the top star in this private club. Those who can come here are either rich or noble, and there may not be many guests who would allow Mu Xia to accompany her. Gu Tingyao is one of them. Chapter 16 Sitting on his lap. In fact, when Gu Tingyao came, he basically didn't allow female public relations to accompany him. But one time, Mu Xia poured him a glass of wine and he drank it, so everyone felt that Mu Xia was more or less different in his heart. After all, she is the top star in the club, her looks, figure and talents are all first rate. Mu Xia thought so too. So today, when she heard that Gu Tingyao was coming, she immediately wanted to go to the private room to accompany him. Unexpectedly, Gu Tingyao also brought his secretary. As for Secretary Wen, she had heard of him. He was Gu Tingyao's chief secretary, but she had never seen him. "Today I went to see what this legendary Secretary Wen looks like." "I understand. You should go and have a rest first," Mu Xia said with a smile. "Thank you, Sister Mu." After the female public relations officer left, Mu Xia did not go to the private room immediately, but returned to her own lounge, carefully touched up her makeup, then stood up and walked towards the private room again. Gu Tingyao and others are ready to play cards. A female PR shuffled the cards, and Ji Hanju suddenly said, "Wait, are we just going to fight like this? We have to agree on what the penalty is for losing, right? Isn't it a fine?" Ji Hanju sneered and said, "Who here is short of money? It's boring to fine people. If you want to have fun, then have something exciting." "Ji Hanju, what tricks are you planning?" "What? You don't dare to play?" Ji Hanju asked provocatively. "Why not? Come on, tell me." From beginning to end, Gu Tingyao didn't say a word. Ji Hanju had no intention of asking for his opinion, and said to himself, "How about this? Whoever loses the first round will have to let the woman next to him sit on his lap, how about that?" When he said this, everyone around the card table laughed. Wen Qingli couldn't laugh. She didn't expect Ji Hanju to make such a big deal right away. "Mr. Ji, you are so bad," a female public relations said in a delicate voice. "Women love bad men. Why, isn't my punishment just what you want?" "Hate tilde." Ji Hanju asked Gu Tingyao again, "Ayao, why don't you speak? Do you agree to this punishment?" Wen Qingli really hoped that Gu Tingyao would refuse. However, Gu Tingyao just said calmly, "It's up to you." "Oh? Ayao has agreed. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started." Everyone started to draw cards noisily. Wen Qingli was already on pins and needles. She could only pray silently in her heart that Gu Tingyao's card skills were very poor and he would not lose. However, things don't always go as planned. Gu Tingyao lost the first game. The moment he learned the result, Wen Qingli felt his brain buzz. Wanting her to sit on Gu Tingyao's lap in a place like this, in front of everyone. Oh, a Yao lost. Ji Hanju said meaningfully, the person next to a Yao is Secretary Wen, so according to the punishment. He deliberately didn't finish his words. But everyone knew what he meant. Their eyes shifted between Gu Tingyao and Wen Qingli. They all seemed to be waiting to see whether Gu Tingyao would let Wen Qingli sit on his lap. Gu Tingyao threw the few remaining cards in his hand onto the table without saying a word. He had no intention of refusing at all. Wen Qingli suddenly became angry. She stayed by his side for 5 years, working diligently and accompanying him in overcoming difficulties and expanding his horizons in the business world. In the end, he was going to treat her like this? Even though she climbed into his bed that night, it was because he had lost his mind. She had selfish motives, she liked him, but she had never thought of using what happened that night to blackmail him. Why should he do this? Since he wanted to torture her in this way, she would not let him do so. All he wanted to see was her embarrassment of being forced. She won't give up just like that. Wen Qingli laughed. Her smile was as beautiful as the morning glow, making all the men stare at her in amazement. Gu Tingyao frowned, seeming displeased. However, at this moment, Wen Qingli suddenly stood up and put his hand on his shoulder. Then she turned around and sat on his lap. Before Gu Tingyao could react, he had already embraced the warm and soft girl in his arms. Not only that, Wen Qingli also raised his arms and wrapped them around his neck. Wow! The people around started to make a noise. Some people were also surprised. Gu Tingyao had never done such an intimate thing with any woman before. He didn't even let other women touch him. I didn't expect that he would actually let Wen Qingli sit on his lap. Gu Tingyao looked at Wen Qingli and raised his eyebrows slightly. Boss Gu, what's wrong? Wen Qingli said with a smile, if you lose, you have to accept the punishment. Isn't this the rule that you agreed to, Boss Gu? Gu Tingyao stared at her for a while and smiled too. Secretary Wen really can surprise me from time to time. Mr. Gu, thank you for the compliment. Wen Qingli tried hard to make his body less stiff. Now that things have come to this, she absolutely cannot lose to Gu Tingyao. Anyway, it was Gu Tingyao himself who agreed to the punishment rules. With her like this, Gu Tingyao couldn't find any fault with her. Gu Tingyao didn't speak to her anymore. He maintained this posture and continued to draw cards. At this moment, the two were very close. As their breaths mingled, I couldn't tell whose heartbeat was becoming more irregular. Ji Hanju said as he drew the cards, what is the penalty mechanism for the second round? Let me think about it. Master Ji, do you want to change the tactics every game? This is what makes it fun, isn't it? Ji Hanju laughed wantonly, I don't care, whoever can't afford to play today is against me, Ji Hanju. Look at what Master Ji said. How could we not afford to play? What is the penalty mechanism for the second round? Tell me. Ji Hanju rolled his eyes and said, in the second round, whoever loses will kiss the woman next to him. Oh, Master Ji, you are so annoying. Sitting on your lap is fine, but why do you have to kiss me? The men and women present all smiled ambiguously. Although the female public relations staff seemed to blame Ji Hanju on the surface, they were all veterans in this area and naturally did not think there was anything wrong with it. But Wen Qingli felt his scalp tingling. At this moment, she really wanted to pinch Ji Hanju's neck and ask him if he was deliberately making things difficult for her. She wants to sit on my thighs and kiss me. If Gu Tingyao loses again, will she really have to kiss him? It's not like we haven't kissed before though. But can the current situation be the same? However, Gu Tingyao had no intention of objecting at all and picked up the cards very calmly. Wen Qingli couldn't help but look up at him. But it happened to meet his gaze. There seemed to be mockery in his eyes. The taunting scared her. Wen Qingli gritted his teeth and had to hold on. This was the scene Musier saw when she walked into the private room. Wen Qingli was actually sitting on Gu Tingyao's lap, nestling in his arms. Her eyes suddenly widened and she gasped in disbelief. There is actually a woman who can sit in Gu Tingyao's arms. She had never seen such a scene before. Before, Gu Tingyao just drank the wine she poured, and many female public relations officers envied her. Now, the woman held in Gu Tingyao's arms appeared. Then what about her so-called pouring of wine before? I'm afraid that those who envied her before will secretly laugh at her. Musière bit her lip, calmed herself down, and walked in gracefully. In addition to the table where people were playing cards, there were other people chatting and drinking in the private room. They saw Musière at first sight and their eyes lit up immediately. Isn't this Sière? Long time no see. A man named Deng Chang waved at her with a smile. Come on, sit here with me. Musière could become the top star in the club. Naturally she has some good interpersonal skills. Although her target of this trip was Gu Tingyao, she would not directly reject Deng Chang. After all, Deng Chang is also a rich second generation and cannot be easily offended. Mr. Deng, long time no see. Come, I'll toast you. Musière poured a glass of wine for Deng Chang with a charming look. Deng Chang's bones were almost broken. When he took the wine glass, he took the opportunity to touch Musière's hand. Musière felt uncomfortable, but she didn't show it. Instead, she smiled and said, Mr. Deng, you are so annoying. She raised her voice deliberately. Want to attract Gu Tingyao's attention. However, since she walked in, Gu Tingyao didn't even look at her. Musière's gaze fell on Wen Qingli in Gu Tingyao's arms again. Chapter 17 Secretary Wen, don't be nervous. She thought to herself, this Secretary Wen is indeed beautiful. Even she, who always prided herself on her beauty, felt a sense of crisis. Moreover, Wen Qingli was always by Gu Tingyao's side at work, and now she followed him to this private party. Musière's delicate facial features appeared somewhat distorted. Wen Qingli has always been perceptive, but at this moment she did not notice Musière's unfriendly look. Because her attention was all on the cards in Gu Tingyao's hand. If Gu Tingyao loses this round, she will kiss him in public. Fortunately, Gu Tingyao had a good hand this time. Wen Qingli held his breath and concentrated, quickly analyzing the current situation in his mind. If he performs normally, Gu Tingyao should win. At least you won to be the final loser. Seeing that Gu Tingyao was about to play a wrong card, Wen Qingli suddenly became anxious and subconsciously held his hand, saying, you can't play this one. Gu Tingyao actually stopped and asked her, which one should I play? Wen Qingli was thinking about winning, and for a moment he didn't notice the teasing in Gu Tingyao's tone. He carefully picked a card and said, play this one. After saying that, she didn't wait for Gu Tingyao to answer, she just drew a card and played it. Oh. I can't afford it. Ji Hanju said distressedly, Secretary Wen, how could you do this? You're cheating. Wen Qingli said calmly, Boss Gu and I are in the same group, how can this be called cheating? This. The female public relations officer beside Ji Hanju said with a smile, Mr. Ji, we have neglected this. Let's set a rule from now on. You can only fight by yourself, and people around you cannot help. How about that? TSK, my baby still understands me. Ji Hanju laughed heartily, then the rules are set. Do you all have any objections? Wen Qingli was very dissatisfied. But Ji Hanju didn't seem to be prepared to ask for her opinion at all. She finally understood. Ji Hanju did it on purpose. Although she didn't know why he did that, she absolutely couldn't let him get his wish. But, she couldn't ask Gu Tingyao for help. She had just been thinking that she must not lose to him and must not let him see her embarrassment. If I go and ask him for help again now, wouldn't all my efforts be wasted? Secretary Wen. Gu Tingyao's voice fell from above her head, don't be nervous. Wen Qingli wanted to pinch his flesh. But she wasn't brave enough to do that, so she could only say with a fake smile, Mr. Gu, you're worried. I'm not nervous. Really? Gu Tingyao curled his lips, I see your legs are shaking a little. After that, his hand maliciously touched her leg through the fabric. Wen Qingli was about to say something when a voice suddenly rang beside her. I see that Secretary Wen doesn't look well, is he okay? When Wen Qingli turned around, he saw a beautiful and graceful woman standing next to him. She knew this woman, the top girl in the club, Musière. When she came to deliver something to Gu Tingyao before, she saw her photo hanging on the wall. It is said that many rich young men spent a lot of money on her just to have her accompany them for a night, but Musière never agreed to any man. Now that she appeared here, Wen Qingli probably understood why Musière never even glanced at other men. Because of the disaster that is Gu Tingyao. But she couldn't care less now. Monsieur is her life-saving straw. She immediately said, "Well, I do feel a little uncomfortable. Why don't you go to the lounge next door to rest?" Monsieur said with a smile, "Boss Gu, I'll be with you here." Good. Wen Qingli was about to get off Gu Tingyao's legs, but Gu Tingyao directly hugged her waist. "Want to escape?" Gu Tingyao said in her ear in a voice that only the two of them could hear. Wen Qingli also lowered his voice and said, "Mr. Gu misunderstood. I just want to make room so as not to disturb Mr. Gu and Miss Mu from communicating with each other." Gu Tingyao looked at her with a sinister look. But, to outsiders, it looked like the two of them were biting each other's ears affectionately. "Hey, what are you two doing? We are still here, so please be careful of the impact," Ji Hanju said while trying hard to suppress his smile. "You are not allowed to leave," Gu Tingyao said domineeringly. Wen Qingli really wanted to just leave without caring about anything. But she still had some sanity left. No matter how much she secretly competed with Gu Tingyao, he was still her immediate superior. If he fired her in anger, she would really have nowhere to cry. So Wen Qingli could only endure it and turned to give Monsieur an apologetic smile. "Sire, it seems that Mr. Gu doesn't need you to accompany him today." Deng Chan came over and pulled Monsieur's arm. "You should come and accompany me, let's go." Monsieur secretly resented it. Wen Qingli clearly didn't want to give President Gu to her, and he was even pretending to be nice to her just now. She was worried about something and didn't notice that Deng Chan was actually pulling her out of the private room. Only after leaving the private room did Monsieur suddenly come to her senses. "Mr. Deng, where are you taking me?" she asked with a forced smile. Deng Chan smiled with an ambiguous tone and said, "Didn't I ask you to accompany me tonight? Sire, I have liked you for a long time. Now that Mr. Gu doesn't want you, then you should follow me." After saying that, Deng Chan pushed Monsieur into the lounge next to him. Their life-saving straw was taken away, and Wen Qingli felt very anxious. But when she counted the cards that had already been played and looked at the cards in Gu Tingyao's hand, she thought that as long as Gu Tingyao didn't lose on purpose, he wouldn't be the last one to play. Gu Tingyao didn't seem to have any intention of losing on purpose and played his cards normally. Wen Qingli breathed a sigh of relief. Now only Gu Tingyao and Ji Hanju are left. The cards in Ji Hanju's hand should be very small. But just when Gu Tingyao had only a few larger single cards left, Ji Hanju suddenly threw out a king, and then played several pairs in a row, and used up all the cards. Wen Qingli's mind was full of question marks. Didn't she remember that the king had already come out? Where did Ji Hanju get this king? "Oh, I'm so sorry, Ayao," Ji Hanju said with a smile, "you lose this round again." Gu Tingyao threw away the remaining cards in his hand with an expressionless face. Wen Qingli's whole body stiffened. She thought Gu Tingyao would probably refuse, right? Although no one else present seemed to take the kiss seriously. But based on her understanding of Gu Tingyao, he is not such a casual person. "Ayao, you can't afford to play anymore, right?" Hearing Ji Hanju's question, Wen Qingli looked up at Gu Tingyao. But she met his dark eyes. Wen Qingli's heart began to beat rapidly. The two were already very close at this moment. If he just lowered his head slightly, he could really kiss her. "Give me a kiss, give me a kiss." I don't know who started it, but everyone started to make a fuss. Wen Qingli felt his face burning. She didn't know if it was her illusion, but at this moment, Gu Tingyao's eyes were so hot that they seemed to melt her. Their lips were getting closer and closer. Chapter 18. Are you crazy? With a bang, the door of the private room was violently slammed open. The loud noise attracted everyone's attention. The person who broke in was Monsieur. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes were in tatters, and there were clear finger marks on her face. "Mr. Gu, save me!" Monsieur shouted in panic. She shouted and ran towards Gu Tingyao. Wen Qingli took the opportunity to get off Gu Tingyao and stood aside. Gu Tingyao just felt his arms were empty. It seemed like something else was also empty. His face darkened. Monsieur seemed to be really frightened and even wanted to throw herself into Gu Tingyao's arms. Fortunately, Ji Hanju was quick-witted and quickly grabbed her arm. "Sire, what happened?" Ji Hanju asked. "Master Ji." Monsieur burst into tears. I. Just then, Deng Chan also ran in with an angry face. There was a bloody mark on his neck, and he was shirtless with only a pair of boxer briefs on his lower body. Several female public relations officers cried out in delight. Wen Qingli's mouth twitched and he looked away. Deng Chan's figure is really eye-catching. Seeing Deng Chan like this, combined with Mu Xia's crying appearance at the moment, everyone had an idea in their hearts. Deng Chan, what are you doing? Ji Hanju, who was always smiling, frowned at this moment. You are forcing my people on my territory. This club was opened by Ji Hanju, so it is not wrong to say that Mu Xia and other female public relations people are his people. Deng Chan was originally glaring at Mu Xia fiercely, but when he heard Ji Hanju questioning him like this, he restrained himself a little. Brother Ju, it was this woman who seduced me first. But when we entered the room, she refused to do it again. Deng Chan said angrily. I didn't. Mu Xia said quickly, I didn't seduce him at all. He was the one who dragged me to the lounge next door. It took her a lot of effort to escape from Deng Chan. She hasn't even given it to Gu Tingyao yet. How could she be ruined by someone like Deng Chan? So her first reaction was to ask Gu Tingyao for help. You still dare to quibble? Deng Chan shouted angrily. In his eyes, Mu Xia was just a female public relations officer. Even if she is the top star, so what? Can Ji Hanju turn against him for a female public relations officer? Before, he always thought that Gu Tingyao was interested in Mu Xia, so he didn't dare to take action. But today Gu Tingyao came with Secretary Wen. What does Mu Xia count for? Mu Xia also knew that her status could not be compared with Deng Chan's. She covered her face and cried desperately. Just then, she suddenly felt someone putting a piece of clothing on her. She raised her tear-stained face and was stunned. The person who put clothes on her was Wen Qingli. You? Wen Qingli didn't think too much about it. She just felt that it was really uncomfortable for a girl who had just been bullied and was in dishevel in front of so many people. It just so happened that she was wearing a coat today. So she took it off and put it on Mu Xia. Deng Chan sneered and said, Brother Ju, I have to say that the female public relations officer in your club really doesn't know the rules. She's the top girl, and she treats guests like this? Look at what she did to my neck after she grabbed it. Then what do you want? Ji Hanju asked in a deep voice. Hey, we are such a close friend, what can I do? Just let her go with me, and I will pretend that this incident never happened. As soon as he finished speaking, a cup suddenly hit him. Deng Chan was startled, but fortunately he reacted quickly and jumped away. The cup hit the ground and broke into pieces instantly. The room suddenly became quiet, and you could hear a pin drop. Because the person who just smashed the cup was Gu Tingyao. Are you crazy? Gu Tingyao asked coldly without even raising his eyelids, taking another cup in his hand. Deng Chan opened his mouth, but no words came out, and cold sweat instantly broke out on his forehead. Gu Tingyao actually spoke up to take care of this matter? It shouldn't be like this. But at this moment, Gu Tingyao's expression was indeed very ugly. Could it be that Gu Tingyao still cares about Mu Xia in his heart? Then he really hit a wall. Although he was able to participate in this game, he was not very familiar with Gu Tingyao. There is no way Gu Tingyao would give him face. He is not afraid of Ji Hanju, but he is afraid of Gu Tingyao. Mr. Gu. Mu Xia felt that Gu Tingyao was supporting her and cried with joy. However, Gu Tingyao didn't even look at her, but just played with the cup in his hand, as if he might throw it at Deng Chan again at any time. Deng Chan's legs felt a little weak. He could only smile awkwardly and said, Boss Gu, I was just joking. Just pretend that what happened just now never happened. It didn't happen. Gu Tingyao's cold voice interrupted him. Deng Chan trembled with fear. You did something wrong and you want to clear yourself of all blame by pretending it never happened. I apologize to Xia. No, I apologize to Miss Mu. Deng Chan had completely lost his previous arrogance and became terrified. Miss Mu, I was confused for a moment. I was wrong. Please forgive me. Mu Xia looked at Gu Tingyao. Wen Qingli also glanced at him. She thought, it seems that he cares about Mu Xia. Mu Xia knew her identity and didn't want to make herself look too bad. For her, Gu Tingyao's willingness to stand up for her was the biggest surprise of the day. She was just about to tell Deng Chan to forget it, when she suddenly heard Gu Tingyao ask, "Secretary Wen, what do you think?" Musier was stunned. Wen Qingli didn't understand why either. What does this have to do with her? Why should I ask her? After a pause, she said, "The victim is Miss Mu, so let Miss Mu decide." Musier smiled at her, and then said, "Since Master Deng has already apologized, then, let's forget about this matter." "I'm fine, Mr. Gu." Gu Tingyao put the cup on the table with a bang. Musier was frightened by him. When Deng Chang heard Musier say this, he quickly turned around and ran away. Anyway, Musier said she forgave him, so Gu Tingyao shouldn't do anything to him anymore, right? Two female public relations staff came over and helped Musier up from the ground. "Sister Mu, are you okay?" Musier shook her head, and then said to Gu Tingyao, "Mr. Gu, thank you for what you did just now. I will go back and change my clothes first." Gu Tingyao said, lightly. After Musier left, Gu Tingyao said to Wen Qingli, "Terminate all cooperation with the Deng group." Wen Qingli felt a little stuffy in her chest, but she quickly replied, "Yes, I'll arrange for someone to take care of it right away." After saying that, Wen Qingli went outside the private room to make a phone call. Someone who was good at handling things livened up the atmosphere, and the people in the private room started playing again. Ji Hanju came closer to Gu Tingyao and looked at him with a smile. Gu Tingyao glanced at him and said, "Your smile is too ugly, take it back." "I won't." Ji Hanju said frivolously, "Ayao, you looked so handsome when you risked your life for your beloved just now." Chapter 19, A Rage for Beauty. "I just don't know, is this beauty you're after, Miss Mu, or Secretary Wen?" Noisy. Gu Tingyao frowned. "Hey, you feel guilty, you feel guilty." Ji Hanju was overjoyed. "You were about to have sex, but someone interrupted you. You must be mad to death." Gu Tingyao felt that Ji Hanju was very noisy and he was in a bad mood. But he couldn't explain why he felt so bad. But he was sure that it was definitely not because of Musier. Is it really like what Ji Hanju said? Gu Tingyao looked towards the door. He knew that Wen Qingli was standing outside and making a phone call. His mood got worse. When Musier changed her clothes and returned to the door of the private room with a bag, Wen Qingli had just finished his phone call. "Secretary Wen, thank you so much for what you did just now," Musier said sincerely. Just now, everyone might have thought that it was okay for a woman like her to appear in front of everyone in disheveled clothes. Only when Qingli put clothes on her. She couldn't describe what she felt in her heart, but from that moment on, it was difficult for her to have any hostility towards Wen Qingli. "It's okay." Wen Qingli smiled, "It's just a piece of cake. I'll return your coat to you after I wash it. It might be cold outside at night. I brought you a new coat that I haven't worn yet." As she spoke, Musier handed the bag in her hand to Wen Qingli. "In this weather, it is really cold at night." So Wen Qingli didn't refuse. He thanked him and took it. After the two of them walked into the private room together, everyone in the room looked at them. Both of them are women who have relationships with Gu Tingyao, but now, their relationship seems to be pretty good. Musier walked up to Gu Tingyao, poured him a glass of wine, and then poured herself a glass. She said with red eyes, "Mr. Gu, thank you so much for saving me just now. Deng Chang is also a rich second generation. Even if other people are not afraid of him, they will not offend him for a female public relations officer. If Gu Tingyao didn't speak up, she would probably be taken away by Deng Chang today. Although she was capable of handling things, she couldn't save herself in this situation. This glass of wine is for you." After saying that, Musier raised her head and drank the wine in the glass in one gulp. After drinking, she looked at Gu Tingyao pitifully again. Gu Tingyao didn't say anything, but he drank the glass of wine that Musier poured for him. Musier smiled happily and sat next to Gu Tingyao courageously. She was actually very nervous. Fortunately, Gu Tingyao did not let her leave. Her face blushed slightly and she poured another glass of wine for Gu Tingyao. Ji Hanju gave Gu Tingyao a meaningful look, and then said to Wen Qingli, "Secretary Wen, can you play billiards? Shall we play a game?" Wen Qingli smiled faintly and said, "No, Master Ji, I should go back now. Since Musier is already with Gu Tingyao, can she leave? After all, they are in love with each other, and her being here will only make them feel upset." She also needs to go back and sort out what happened today. Also, she had to think about what she should do next if Gu Tingyao really wanted to fire her for what happened that night. So early. Ji Hanju looked a little regretful, then. He glanced at Gu Tingyao secretly. Gu Tingyao did not object. Wen Qingli breathed a sigh of relief and turned to leave. Before leaving the private room, she saw from the corner of her eye that Monsieur was saying something to Gu Tingyao with a smile on her face. Her heart ached slightly, but soon she opened the door and left. As we walked out of the club, a cold wind soon blew over us. Wen Qingli shuddered and quickly took out his coat from the bag and put it on. After putting it on, she discovered that this coat was the flagship model of the new clothing series launched by GU Group some time ago. So, could this coat be a gift from Gu Tingyao to Monsieur? Wen Qingli smiled bitterly. At this point, what's the point of her thinking about these things? She was about to go to the subway station when she heard her cell phone ring. I took out my cell phone and saw it was a message from Gu Tingyao. Let the driver go back first, you wait for me here. Wen Qingli. She really wanted to go back and beat Gu Tingyao up. But she didn't dare. So she could only grit her teeth and reply to his message. Okay, Mr. Gu. After the driver left, Wen Qingli sat in the driver's seat. There was warm air blowing in the car, so it wasn't cold at all. The slow music added a special atmosphere. But Wen Qingli had no mood to enjoy it. There was obviously a driver, so why did Gu Tingyao ask her to wait here? What's more, Monsieur is by his side tonight, so it's not certain whether he will come out. Thinking of this, Wen Qingli felt a sense of bitterness in his heart. About 2 hours later, when Wen Qingli was almost asleep, he saw Ji Hanju helping Gu Tingyao out of the club. Gu Tingyao's steps were a little unsteady, and he looked as if he was drunk. If it were any normal time, Wen Qingli would have already gotten out of the car to help Gu Tingyao. But at this moment she was a little angry, and thinking that Gu Tingyao was drunk and might not remember anything, she did not get out of the car and sat safely in the driver's seat. Ji Hanju opened the back door and helped Gu Tingyao to get in. A smell of alcohol hit me in the face. Wen Qingli was surprised. In fact, Gu Tingyao has strong self-control when it comes to drinking. He has a clear understanding of his drinking capacity. Even when attending a business dinner, he would never allow himself to drink too much. It's really rare to be like this today. Wen Qingli turned around and greeted Ji Hanju. Master Ji. Secretary Wen, I'll leave this guy in your hands. Ji Hanju said helplessly, he drank so much tonight, I don't know what's wrong with him. Mr. Gu rarely drinks so much. Wen Qingli said. Maybe he's in a bad mood, Secretary Wen, you have to comfort him after you send him back. Wen Qingli. Shouldn't Monsieur be the one doing this kind of thing? Gu Tingyao is now looking at her with displeasure. If she came to comfort him, he would probably be in an even worse mood. However, Wen Qingli couldn't help but give Ji Hanju face. So she could only smile and nodded, then say goodbye to Ji Hanju. After Ji Hanju closed the car door, Wen Qingli started the car. She saw from the rearview mirror that Gu Tingyao was leaning back in his chair with his eyes closed. He looks very uncomfortable. Mr. Gu, do you want to turn on the heater and open the window for a while? Wen Qingli asked. She waited for 3 full minutes, but Gu Tingyao didn't say anything. Wen Qingli didn't ask any more questions. It wasn't her car anyway. Even if he wanted to vomit in the car, she didn't feel sorry for him. Gu Tingyao lives in the villa in Nanshan Bay most of the time. Wen Qingli had sent him back before, so he knew the way. After the car entered the garage, Wen Qingli unbuckled her seat belt. Seeing that Gu Tingyao, who was sitting in the back, still had his eyes closed, she tentatively called out, Mr. Gu. Chapter 20. You're here with me. Gu Tingyao didn't open his eyes or speak. It seems that he was really drunk and fell asleep. Wen Qingli felt a headache. It would be too difficult for her to bring the tall and strong Gu Tingyao back by herself. Wen Qingli got out of the car, walked around to the back seat, opened the door, reached out and gently patted Gu Tingyao's shoulder. Boss Gu, wake up. She didn't hold out much hope and was about to go to the villa to call for help, but Gu Tingyao suddenly grabbed her wrist. He is very strong. Wen Qingli raised his head in pain and met his eyes, which had just opened. Maybe because he was drunk, there was a mist in his eyes at the moment, which just covered up all his emotions. Mr. Gu. Wen Qingli called him tentatively. Gu Tingyao seemed to realize only now that the person in front of him was her. He relaxed his strength a little, but then he pulled her into the car with force. Wen Qingli was caught off guard and fell directly on him. He groaned in pain. She cursed him in her heart, but seeing his frown, she could only ask, "Mr. Gu, are you okay?" She asked, trying to get up from him. However, Gu Tingyao stretched out his arms, held her waist and prevented her from leaving. "Mr. Gu." Wen Qingli's scalp tingled. Today, Gu Tingyao was abnormal from morning to night. She didn't know how to cope anymore. Gu Tingyao held her tightly. It was as if they were a couple in love, hugging each other tightly. For a moment, Wen Qingli also wanted to let himself go and sink into this false illusion. "Wen Qingli." Gu Tingyao called her. He was clearly just calling her name, but Wen Qingli's heart felt as if it was being gently tickled by something, making it feel itchy and numb. Gu Tingyao seldom called her name. He always called her Secretary Wen in a cold voice. She couldn't remember the last time he called her name. "Boss Gu, you're drunk." Wen Qingli tried to regain his consciousness. "I'll ask someone to help you back." "Let me go first." "I won't let go." There was a hint of drunkenness in his voice, and suddenly he was like a child who had caught candy and was stubbornly refusing to let go. Wen Qingli didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After being with Gu Tingyao for 5 years, this was the first time she saw Gu Tingyao like this. "So do you want to spend the night in the car?" she asked unhappily. "That's fine," he said, "you stay here with me." Wen Qingli. What a psycho. She really wanted to hit someone. At this moment, she no longer cared about many things and just wanted to struggle out of his arms. God knew that her current posture was both physically and psychologically uncomfortable. But at this moment, Gu Tingyao suddenly spoke again. "Wen Qingli, why do you treat me like this?" Wen Qingli's body stiffened. He looked at her, and the mist in his eyes gradually dissipated, revealing an indescribable sadness. But Wen Qingli didn't understand what he meant. Did he still feel that she had betrayed him by leaking company secrets to a rival? Does he still not believe her? "You could have told me." His voice was hoarse and full of resentment. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Mr. Gu, you." Wen Qingli really wanted to ask him what he was talking about. As a result, Gu Tingyao closed his eyes again, and it seemed that he was really drunk and fell asleep. Wen Qingli felt as if there was a breath stuck in his chest, neither going up nor down. She laughed helplessly twice, but couldn't help but look at his sleeping eyes greedily. Perhaps, only at this moment, she dared to allow herself to look at him with such eyes. If Gu Tingyao knew that she had been secretly hiding her love for him, he would probably fire her immediately without caring about anything. After all, he values her. In addition to her strong work ability, there is another very important reason, that is, she is sensible and has good taste. If she is not sensible and doesn't know what to do. A bitter smile appeared on Wen Qingli's lips. When Gu Tingyao woke up, it was already daybreak. His head hurts a bit. When he rubbed his head and sat up, he found himself lying on the bed in the bedroom. When did he come back? Gu Tingyao frowned slightly. He remembered that he asked Wen Qingli to wait for him in the car last night. Then we started drinking. What happened later? This feeling of having no control over things made him very unhappy. That's why he never lets himself get drunk, let alone blacking out. But last night, he made a rare exception. Gu Tingyao got out of bed irritably and went to the bathroom to take a shower. After he came out of the bathroom with a towel wrapped around his lower body, he suddenly received a call from Ji Hanju. As soon as he answered the phone, Ji Hanju yawned loudly from the other end. "You called me just to let me hear you yawn." Hearing Gu Tingyao's unhappy voice, Ji Hanju said with a smile, "What's wrong with you? You are so angry in the morning. Could it be that you didn't have a hot night last night?" Gu Tingyao sneered and asked, "What nonsense are you talking about?" "Ayao, stop pretending in front of me." Ji Hanju laughed twice. "It was Secretary Wen who sent you home last night. Didn't you two take advantage of the opportunity to have something happen?" "Wen Qingli?" Gu Tingyao was slightly stunned. Then, a picture suddenly appeared in his mind. It seemed like Wen Qingli was lying on him, and he was holding Wen Qingli's waist tightly, not letting her leave. Gu Tingyao pursed his lips. "Ayao, why are you silent?" Ji Hanju asked again, Could it be that Secretary Wen is lying next to you now? I will sew your mouth shut sooner or later. Okay, I won't say anything. Ji Hanju surrendered, but Yao, since you like Secretary Wen, you should treat her well and stop looking down on her all the time. When did I say I like Secretary Wen? Gu Tingyao frowned. You didn't say it, but we have known each other for so many years, don't I know you? I saw it a long time ago. Ji Hanju said proudly. Gu Tingyao denied it without hesitation. You are mistaken. After saying that, he hung up the phone. He likes Wen Qingli? What a joke. He just felt that Wen Qingli had been working hard and fulfilling his duties over the past 5 years, so he deserved special treatment. Gu Tingyao dried his hair, changed into home clothes and went downstairs. Their housekeeper, Uncle Yu, came over immediately and asked, "What would Mr. Gu like to eat for lunch?" "I'll ask the kitchen to prepare it." "Either is fine," said Gu Tingyao. "Okay." Just as Uncle Yu was about to leave, he suddenly heard Gu Tingyao ask, "Who sent me back last night?" "Secretary Wen sent you back." Uncle Yu replied. Gu Tingyao didn't say anything. Uncle Yu observed his expression and continued, "You were drunk last night, and Secretary Wen couldn't help you into their house by himself, so you came in to find me. I took someone out to help you in." Uncle Yu heard Gu Tingyao's response and thought that nothing was wrong. Who knew that Gu Tingyao asked again, and then? Uncle Yu didn't quite understand. And then of course he went to sleep. Can also. At this time, Uncle Yu suddenly reacted. Gu Tingyao should be asking about Wen Qingli. Then Secretary Wen went home. It was too late, so I asked her if she wanted someone to take her home. She insisted, so I didn't force her, said Uncle Yu. She left after she brought me in. Right. Gu Tingyao didn't say anything else. He turned and went upstairs, leaving Uncle Yu alone there, completely confused. He felt that Mr. Gu seemed a little angry just now. Why? In the barbecue restaurant, Liang Shia stared at the sizzling beef on the iron plate and swallowed her saliva. It smells so good, Qingli, how is this barbecue restaurant I found? Is it pretty good? The meal for two I bought online was less than 100 yuan, and there was so much meat. Wen Qingli smiled and said, "You are the best at finding discounted items like this." "Hey, of course. The meat is ready. Come and eat it, Qingli." Liang Shire was already very hungry and ate with relish. Wen Qingli looked at the delicious meat, but had no appetite. She didn't sleep much last night. As soon as she closed her eyes, Gu Tingyao's 2 sentences would appear in her mind. "Why are you doing this to me? You could have told me, why didn't you tell me?" Wen Qingli couldn't be sure what his 2 sentences meant. Yesterday in the private room, she thought Gu Tingyao already knew that the woman who slept with him that day was her. But judging from his reaction, that doesn't seem to be the case. If Gu Tingyao really knew, he would have questioned her in person long ago, and would not have accused her in such a wronged manner after getting drunk. Grievance. It's really scary to use this word to describe Gu Tingyao. But when Wen Qingli thought of Gu Tingyao in the car last night, this word really emerged in his mind. "Qingli, what's wrong with you?" Liang Shire asked with concern, "Why don't you eat? Are you feeling uncomfortable?" Wen Qingli came back to his senses and said, "No. I was just thinking about something." "Oh, what's the matter that makes you so distracted? Tell me, and I'll help you analyze it." Liang Shire said, "Wait, is your dad in gambling debt again?" "No." Wen Qingli said quickly, "It's not him, it's Mr. Gu." "Mr. Gu?" Liang Shire's face was confused for a moment. "Mr. Gu owes gambling debts." Her words inexplicably touched Wen Qingli's funny spot. She couldn't help laughing, and her shoulders were shaking with laughter. "Hey, don't laugh, tell me quickly, what happened to Mr. Gu, did he embarrass you?" Wen Qingli was used to being cautious. There were people everywhere in the barbecue restaurant at this moment. She would not tell Liang Shire about those things here, so she said, "I'll tell you when you go to my house later." Good. The 2 of them finished their barbecue quickly and were walking out when 2 more people came in, a man and a woman, both young. The man was wearing a brand name with a particularly eye-catching logo, and the woman was dressed delicately and looked like a petite girl. Wen Qingli happened to meet the woman's gaze, and the woman immediately said, "Wen Qingli, why are you here?" Wen Qingli didn't say anything. Liang Shia beside him said in a bad tone, "Of course we are here to eat. Why can't you come to the barbecue restaurant and others can't come? Are you crazy? What's your attitude?" The woman rolled her eyes. "I'm sorry, but I don't need to have a nice attitude towards people like you." Liang Shia rolled her eyes even wider. This woman is Wen Qingli's stepsister, Wen Xiaoyan. After Lu Fang married her to Wen Jianhua, she changed her surname to Wen. Liang Shia knew that Lu Fang and Wen Xiaoyan had been secretly making things difficult for Wen Qingli, so she never had a good attitude towards the mother and daughter. "Shia, let's go," Wen Qingli said. She was too lazy to talk to Wen Xiaoyan, and she didn't want to make Sienna Liang angry for such an unworthy person. "Well, let's go. I just finished eating and I don't want to throw up." "You?" Chapter 21 Your President Gu. When Xiaoyan wanted to explode, but when she saw the man next to her, she held back and showed a pitiful expression. "Dear, they bullied me, and you didn't help me." The man didn't even look at her. His eyes were fixed on Wen Qingli's back. He asked in amazement, "Do you know the woman who didn't say much just now?" "You're talking about Wen Qingli, my relative. What's wrong? You have such a beautiful relative, why didn't you introduce her to me earlier?" Wen Xiaoyan suddenly became anxious. "What do you mean? Are you interested in Wen Qingli?" The man knew he had said something wrong, but he was not too nervous. He just coaxed her casually. "What are you talking about?" "I was just asking casually. Aren't you hungry? Let's go in and eat." After sitting down, the man played with his mobile phone absent-mindedly. His name is Rao Zhenghao, and he is Wen Xiaoyan's high school classmate. At a high school reunion some time ago, Wen Xiaoyan learned from others that Rao Zhenghao's family now had a little money, so she took some effort to hook up with him. Rao Zhenghao was indeed generous to her. He gave her gifts every now and then and said that he could help her find a good job. It has been 2 years since she graduated from college, and she has been unemployed. Although Lu Fang often gives her some money to spend, it is not a good thing to say it to others. Now that Rao Zhenghao said he could help her find a job, of course she was happy. But she didn't expect to meet Wen Qingli here today, and Rao Zhenghao was obviously interested in Wen Qingli. That vixen relies on her face to seduce men. However, Wen Xiaoyan doesn't dare to turn against Rao Zhenghao yet. So she could only endure it secretly. After ordering the dishes, Wen Xiaoyan asked in a coquettish voice, "Honey, when can you help me find a job? My mom urged me yesterday, but I still don't have a job. She said it would be embarrassing to go out." "Don't worry," Rao Zhenghao said nonchalantly, "I've told my dad, and he said he can get you into the GU group." "Are you serious? GU group?" Wen Xiaoyan exclaimed, "That's a place that many graduates from prestigious universities are scrambling to get into. Can your dad really let me in?" "Yes, I can, but I can only make you a small clerk." "It's okay, as long as I can get in." Being a small clerk certainly made Wen Xiaoyan very dissatisfied. When she realized it, she had to step into the door of GU Group first. She knew that Wen Qingli was the chief secretary of Gu Tingyao, the president of GU Group. Previously, Lu Fang wanted Wen Qingli to help her get her into GU Group, but Wen Qingli flatly refused. What is so great about that? When she joins GU Group, maybe she will have the chance to meet Mr. GU, and then. Wen Xiaoyan was having a sweet dream when she suddenly heard Rao Zhenghao say, "You asked me to help you, so you have to give me something in return, right?" Wen Xiaoyan was stunned for a moment, then blushed and said, "I know, I'll go home with you in a while." "That's not enough." Rao Zhenghao smiled frivolously, "Give me the contact information of that relative you just mentioned." Wen Xiaoyan was dissatisfied, but she dared not say anything, so she could only give him Wen Qingli's phone number. Humph, if he wants to find Wen Qingli, then let him do it. Once she climbs up to Mr. Gu, will she still care about him? Liang Shia followed Wen Qingli back to her apartment. The two of them sat on the sofa and chatted, each holding a can of Coke. Wen Qingli told Liang Shia everything that happened last night. Liang Shia had an indescribable expression after hearing this. "What's with that expression on your face?" Wen Qingli took a big sip of Coke. "Mr. Gu's temper is really a bit weird." Wen Qingli nearly spit out a mouthful of Coke and quickly said, "Stop, stop. What do you mean by our Mr. Gu?" "Oh, just understand what I mean." Liang Shia also took a sip of Coke and said thoughtfully, "He said that you are no different from those women, which is indeed too much, but why do I feel something is wrong?" "What's wrong?" I can't tell you either. Liang Shire said, anyway, there is a misunderstanding between you now, so you can explain it to him. Or, when the murderer who really leaked the company's secrets is found, he will naturally know that you didn't betray him. After hearing her say this, Wen Qingli suddenly fell silent. Qingli. Actually, there's more to it than this. Wen Qingli said with a wry smile, there's one more thing. What's up? Wen Qingli's ears turned red. After thinking for a while, she shook her head and said, it's nothing, just a small matter. She should not let Sienna Liang know about what happened that night. It's not that she doesn't trust Liang Shire, but if Gu Tingyao really knew about this matter, perhaps everyone who knew about it would be implicated. Sometimes, the less you know about something, the better. Liang Shire looked at her and suddenly said, Qingli, there is something I don't know whether I should say it or not. You say. Are you and Mr. Gu really just an ordinary superior-subordinate relationship? Wen Qingli's heart skipped a beat. Even in front of her best friend, she actually felt a little guilty. Why do I feel that your attitude towards him, and his attitude towards you, are both very special? Liang Shire said. Wen Qingli shook his head, nothing like that. Even if Gu Tingyao treated her specially, it was only because she was a qualified secretary. Have you collected the money for your father's gambling debt? If not, do you want to try to borrow money from him? After hearing what Liang Shire said, Wen Qingli was a little confused. Didn't Liang Shire transfer 800,000 to her last time? It was more than enough to pay off the gambling debts, so why would she ask this? But at this moment, Liang Shire's cell phone rang. After she answered the phone, she said a few words and then said to Wen Qingli, Qingli, my mother said something happened and asked me to go home quickly. I have to go first. Good. After seeing Liang Shire off, Wen Qingli drank the rest of the coke and breathed a long sigh of relief. She had kept everything inside herself before, but now, after talking to her bestie, she felt much better. Forget it, when the enemy comes, we will fight him with our soldiers, and when the water comes, we will block it with earth. Some things will not change even if she keeps worrying about them. Wen Qingli simply tidied up the house and just took out his computer to prepare for work when he suddenly received a text message. Beautiful lady, do you remember me? The one who was with your relative in the barbecue restaurant just now. I think we are very compatible. How about we be friends? Wen Qingli blocked the phone number expressionlessly. As soon as Wen Qingli arrived at the company on Monday morning, he heard a piece of news. Wan Hong found out the traitor and said that an employee in the new product project team leaked the secrets to Shanghai International for money. At present, this employee has been taken to the detention center and it seems that he will go to jail. Wen Qingli knew very well that this employee was most likely just a scapegoat. She went into the office and reported the news to Gu Tingyao. Gu Tingyao seemed to have known it and was not too surprised. Boss Gu, do you want to continue investigating this matter? Chapter 22. I think it's quite suitable. You don't have to check. Gu Tingyao said lightly. Wen Qingli lowered his eyes and said, yes. In this matter, Du Xian was clearly targeting her. Later, they found that she was not so easy to deal with, so they hurriedly found a scapegoat. At this point, how could Gu Tingyao not see it? But now Gu Tingyao told her not to investigate. Does that mean he doesn't want to pursue the matter anymore? That's right, how could Gu Tingyao make enemies with the Du family for her? The Du family is not as good as the Gu family, but it is also a prominent family. It's not worth it for a secretary like her. Wen Qingli reported some work to Gu Tingyao again. From beginning to end, the two of them tacitly did not mention what happened in the club that night. It was as if it had never happened at all. But Wen Qingli could tell that Gu Tingyao was a little different from usual. He still seemed angry. After finishing the work report, Wen Qingli took a deep breath and asked, Boss Gu, are you dissatisfied with my recent work? Even if she is going to die, she must die knowingly. Wen Qingli didn't want to play guessing games with Gu Tingyao anymore. Gu Tingyao raised his eyes to look at her, tapping his index finger on the table. At work, no, he said. Wen Qingli wanted to say something else, but Gu Tingyao said, you go out first. Okay. When she came out of Gu Tingyao's office, she saw Fei Fei standing in front of her desk with a timid look on her face. Secretary Wen, No need to say more. Wen Qingli said calmly, go and resign, and hand over all your work to Anna. Secretary Wen, please give me another chance. Fei Fei said with red eyes, I was bewitched. I swear to you, I will never do such a bad thing again. Wen Qingli raised his eyes. She was not angry, but asked calmly, if you succeed in framing me, will I still have a chance? Fei Fei was speechless. Go and resign. Also, I will inform the entire bank about this matter. If you still want to find a job, I suggest you move to another city. Fei Fei suddenly opened her eyes wide, her face pale. You have such a cruel heart. Wen Qingli ignored her, sat down and started working. Normally she was reluctant to be aggressive. But since others are pushing her into a desperate situation, don't blame her for being merciless. Fei Fei took a deep breath. She probably knew that it was useless to ask Wen Qingli for help, so she said viciously, Wen Qingli, don't be too proud. Do you think you can always sit firmly in the position of chief secretary? Things in the world are unpredictable. Be careful not to fall hard when you climb high. After saying that, Fei Fei turned and left. Wen Qingli curled his lips but didn't take her words to heart. A lot of things have indeed happened recently, but her fate cannot be determined by Fei Fei's curse. Not long after Fei Fei left, Wen Qingli contacted his colleagues in the Human Resources Department and posted a recruitment notice. Although Fei Fei is just a small assistant, the number of people in the president's office must be strictly controlled. If Fei Fei leaves, someone must take her place. Less than half an hour later, Wen Qingli received a call from the Deputy Director of the Human Resources Department. Deputy Director RAO. Wen Qingli said politely, what's the matter? Secretary Wen, I just heard that you are recruiting an assistant for the president's office. The middle-aged man on the other end of the phone said with a smile, it just so happens that I have a very suitable candidate here. She has already arrived at the company. Can I bring her up to meet you? Okay, thank you for your help. Since he was recommended by the Deputy Director of the Human Resources Department, she had to give him some face. Besides, a small assistant is enough. She will train you after you join the president's office. Soon, Deputy Director RAO brought a young woman into the president's office. Secretary Wen, this is the person I was talking to you about. Wen Qingli looked up and his expression changed immediately. The person brought by Deputy Director RAO turned out to be Wen Xiaoyan. Hello, Secretary Wen. Wen Xiaoyan greeted politely. Her name is Wen Xiaoyan. Oh, it just so happens that both of you have the last name Wen. You are destined to meet each other. Deputy Director RAO didn't know the relationship between the two of them, and said with a smile, this girl is a college graduate. She is hardworking and down to earth. Let her gain some experience in the president's office. Wen Qingli. Hearing Deputy Director RAO's adjective, she felt embarrassed for Wen Xiaoyan. Hardworking and willing to work, down to earth and able to endure hardships, how can these have anything to do with Wen Xiaoyan? I'm sorry, Deputy Director RAO, Wen Qingli said, she's not suitable. Wen Xiaoyan's face suddenly darkened. Deputy Director RAO said a little embarrassedly, how did Secretary Wen know at first glance that she was not suitable? I assure you that she will definitely do a good job. Although the girl is young, she is eager to learn. If there is anything she doesn't understand, just teach her. Wen Qingli remained silent. She didn't know how Wen Xiaoyan had managed to establish a relationship with Deputy Director RAO. But, he is the Deputy Director of the Human Resources Department after all. After saying so much, if she still disagrees, it would be too disrespectful to him. But she knew Wen Xiaoyan very well. An assistant doesn't need to be too capable, but he definitely can't be such a person who is lazy, cunning and treacherous. Just when they were in a stalemate, Gu Tingyao walked out of the office. Wen Qingli remembered that a meeting would start soon and Gu Tingyao should be preparing to go to the meeting room. Mr. Gu. Deputy Director RAO greeted him quickly. When Wen Xiaoyan saw Gu Tingyao, her eyes widened. This is Mr. Gu. She had seen Gu Tingyao's photos on the internet before. But now looking at it this way, Gu Tingyao is even more handsome in person than in the photo. And he has a great figure. Wen Xiaoyan couldn't help but start imagining what Gu Tingyao would look like when he took off his clothes. A man like this must be very fierce in bed, right? As long as she can get into the CEO's office, she will find a way to become Gu Tingyao's woman. What are you doing? Gu Tingyao frowned slightly. Hello, Mr. Gu. Wen Xiaoyan said first, my name is Wen Xiaoyan, and I'm the new assistant in the president's office. Gu Tingyao ignored her and looked at Wen Qingli. Wen Qingli said, It was someone recommended by Deputy Director RAO, but I don't think he's suitable. Gu Tingyao usually doesn't ask about such trivial matters, and she is the one who makes the decision. Hearing her say this, Gu Tingyao finally gave Wen Xiaoyan a look. Wen Xiaoyan immediately smiled, which she thought was very charming. Gu Tingyao looked at Wen Qingli again. She lowered her eyes, her face expressionless, and maintained her usual businesslike attitude. Gu Tingyao suddenly became very annoyed. He said coldly, "I think it's quite suitable. Stay." After saying that, he walked away. Wen Qingli felt a little blocked in the head. Deputy Director RAO breathed a sigh of relief and said to the overjoyed Wen Xiaoyan, "Since President Gu said in person that he wants to keep you, you have to work hard and don't embarrass me. Don't worry." After Wen Xiaoyan finished speaking, she looked at Wen Qingli proudly again. Chapter 23. Are you a fool? After Deputy Director RAO left, Wen Qingli took his laptop and prepared to go to the meeting room. Wen Xiaoyan stood in front of her and said sarcastically, "Wen Qingli, I know you want to do bad things and don't want me to join GU Group, but what about now? President GU asked me to stay. Har har, it seems that your status in President Gu's mind is not that good. Get out of the way." Wen Qingli said coldly. "I won't let you do anything to me. What can you do to me?" Wen Xiaoyan said defiantly, "Didn't you see it just now? As soon as Mr. Gu saw me, he immediately asked me to stay. It was clearly." Wen Qingli really didn't want to listen to her chattering, so he interrupted her with a cold face, "Get lost." Wen Xiaoyan's voice stopped abruptly. She had to admit that she was a little intimidated by Wen Qingli's aura. Anna, the assistant at the side, came over and said to Wen Xiaoyan, "Come with me first. I'll take you to your workstation. Secretary Wen is going to the meeting room now. If she's late, President Gu will be angry, and everyone in the president's office will suffer." Wen Xiaoyan had no choice but to move aside. Wen Qingli immediately walked towards the meeting room in her high heels without even looking at her. "Why are you so arrogant?" Wen Xiaoyan said to her back. Anna kindly advised, "Secretary Wen is CEO Gu's chief secretary. The entire CEO's office, except CEO Gu, has to listen to her. You'd better not make things difficult for her. Why should I be afraid of her?" Wen Xiaoyan sneered, "Boss Gu just showed that he treats me differently. I have Boss Gu's support, so why should I be afraid of her?" Anna. She looked at Wen Xiaoyan speechlessly, thinking that she was actually a fool. After the meeting, Wen Qingli followed Gu Tingyao back to the president's office. On the way, she couldn't help but say, "Boss Gu, Wen Xiaoyan is really not suitable to stay in the CEO's office." Gu Tingyao said coldly, "Secretary Wen thinks it's inappropriate, but I think it's appropriate." "What, now Secretary Wen wants to be my boss? I didn't mean that." Wen Qingli didn't quite understand why Gu Tingyao wanted to keep Wen Xiaoyan after just one look at her. Before, she thought that after being with him for 5 years, she already knew him very well. But now she suddenly found that she seemed to be unable to see through him more and more. Wen Qingli was thinking secretly when Gu Tingyao, who was walking in front of him, suddenly stopped. She was caught off guard and didn't have time to brake, and she bumped directly into Gu Tingyao's solid back. Hum. Wen Qingli covered her nose in pain, tears almost welling up in her eyes. When Gu Tingyao turned around, he saw her pitiful appearance. He couldn't help but frown and asked her, "Are you a fool?" "I didn't." Wen Qingli wanted to argue. How did she know he would stop suddenly? Gu Tingyao reached out and held her wrist, taking her hand away from her nose. Her nose was red from the collision just now. "It looks a bit pitiful and a bit funny." The corners of Gu Tingyao's mouth curled up slightly. Everything returned to normal soon. But that little movement in that instant did not escape Wen Qingli's eyes. Was he just laughing at her? Absolutely. Noticing Wen Qingli's resentful look, Gu Tingyao's mood inexplicably improved. He let go of her hand and said, "Everyone in the president's office is under your charge. If you think they are not up to par, just teach them more." He doesn't care who takes on the role of a junior assistant. He just wanted to be angry with Wen Qingli a little bit. But at this moment, looking at Wen Qingli's red nose, his anger subsided a little. Wen Qingli really wanted to say that some people cannot be taught. But she finally restrained herself and responded. Gu Tingyao stared at her, and suddenly the words Ji Hanju had said to him yesterday emerged in his mind. Since you like Secretary Wen, treat her well and don't be so rude to her all the time. Mr. Gu. Wen Qingli's voice brought Gu Tingyao back to his senses. Looking at her slightly puzzled expression, Gu Tingyao's mind went blank for a rare moment. But he quickly said, "Ask the advertising department to show me the advertising plan for Plan B." Okay. After returning to the president's office, Gu Tingyao went straight into the office. Wen Qingli turned around and saw Wen Xiaoyan walking towards Gu Tingyao's office with a cup of fruit tea. "What are you doing?" Wen Qingli asked coldly. "Is it not okay for me to bring drinks to Mr. Gu?" Wen Xiaoyan retorted unceremoniously, "Wen Qingli, I'm telling you, you'd better be polite to me, or I'll tell your dad that you bullied me in the company." Wen Qingli laughed twice sarcastically. When Wen Jianhua owed gambling debts before, she really couldn't bear to completely ignore him. But if Wen Xiaoyan thought that she was afraid of that father, she was very wrong. "What are you laughing at?" Wen Xiaoyan rolled her eyes. "Get out of the way. I still have to go find Mr. Gu. I don't want to waste time with you here. I'm kindly reminding you." Wen Qingli said coldly, "Before, anyone in the CEO's office who had thoughts like yours had already been fired." Wen Xiaoyan's body froze, and then she stiffened her neck and asked, "Who are you trying to scare? Go away." Wen Qingli originally wanted to let her ask for trouble, but seeing the uneasy expressions of the other people in the president's office, she could only stop Wen Xiaoyan. If Gu Tingyao is made unhappy, the entire president's office will suffer. "Wen Qingli. You." Wen Qingli lost his patience and took the fruit tea from Wen Xiaoyan. After testing the temperature of the cup, he suddenly poured it on Wen Xiaoyan's face. What are you doing?" Wen Xiaoyan screamed. Wen Qingli had shown no mercy when he splashed the tea just now. The fruit tea was now dripping down her head and face, making her look very embarrassed. Fortunately, the fruit tea was warm, otherwise she would have been scalded to death. "Since talking is useless, I can only use practical actions to tell you the consequences of not listening." Wen Qingli said coldly, "Get out of my sight. If I see you approaching Mr. Gu's office again, don't blame me for asking the security guards to throw you out." "You." "I was asked by President Gu himself to stay." Wen Qingli turned around to get the water cup on his table, which scared Wen Xiaoyan so much that she turned around and ran away. She hurried to the bathroom to clean herself, but no matter how she wiped, she still had a sweet smell of fruit tea on her body. She felt extremely upset and cursed Wen Qingli in her heart. Just at this moment, the cell phone rang. She saw that it was Rao Zhenghao calling, so she picked up the phone immediately. Just as she was about to complain, she heard Rao Zhenghao angrily questioning on the other end of the phone, "Wen Xiaoyan, is the number you gave me fake?" Wen Xiaoyan was a little confused and quickly said, "No." "Then why didn't she reply when I sent her a message, and why couldn't I get through to her on the phone?" Wen Xiaoyan thought that it must be Wen Qingli who blocked him. Wen Xiaoyan felt a little unhappy about Rao Zhenghao's temper, but at this moment, a plan suddenly came to her mind. Chapter 24. It depends on your ability. "Honey, don't worry, maybe there's something wrong with her phone." Rao Zhenghao said in a deep voice, "Are you coaxing a child? I have already asked my father to arrange for you to join the GU group. You have to do what you promised me, right? Don't worry, you just want my relative, right?" Wen Xiaoyan said directly. Rao Zhenghao did not deny it. Although Wen Xiaoyan was his girlfriend in name only, he was just playing around with her. He was not afraid that Wen Xiaoyan would know that he had feelings for another woman. If Wen Xiaoyan dared to make trouble with him, he would kick her out immediately. "Actually, her name is Wen Qingli, and she's my stepfather's daughter." Wen Xiaoyan said, "If you really like her, I'll find a way to get her to meet you. By then, whether you can succeed or not will depend on your own ability." "Really?" Rao Zhenghao's voice was full of surprise. "Are you willing to help me with this?" "Of course, you've helped me, how can I not help you?" Wen Xiaoyan had a weird smile on her face. "You, just wait for my good news." After saying that, she hung up the phone. Looking at her disheveled self in the mirror, Wen Xiaoyan's facial features gradually became distorted. "Wen Qingli, how dare you do this to me? Just wait for me." In the afternoon, a new suit was delivered. Gu Tingyao will attend a cocktail party in a few evenings. This suit is custom made and is very expensive. Wen Qingli checked it carefully and found no problem, so he sent it to Gu Tingyao's office. Gu Tingyao glanced at it calmly and said, "Let it go." Then I'll put you in the lounge. There is a special lounge in Gu Tingyao's office, which is spacious and comfortable, with all kinds of facilities. It will not be a problem for him to live directly in the company. After entering the lounge, Wen Qingli opened the wardrobe, took the suit out of the gift box, and hung it in the closet. She was just about to close the closet door when she suddenly saw an exquisite little box placed in the corner of the closet. She was slightly stunned. This little box seems familiar. If she remembered correctly, 5 years ago, when she first joined the president's office of GU Group, she was not yet the chief secretary to Gu Tingyao. At that time, she heard from her senior that Gu Tingyao had an unforgettable first love. But who it is, no one knows. No one knows where that first love is now. However, the gift that the first love gave to Gu Tingyao was widely circulated. At that time, the senior also showed her the photo of the gift. Above, it seems to be this small box. Don't know what's inside. Of course, Wen Qingli would not pry into other people's privacy. She just forgot to close the closet door for a moment and looked at the small box, slightly distracted. Just then, Gu Tingyao's voice was heard at the door of the lounge. What are you doing? She turned around and saw Gu Tingyao looking at her with cold eyes. Wen Qingli quickly said, I'm hanging up clothes. After saying that, she closed the closet door. Does it take so long to hang up clothes? Gu Tingyao walked over, glanced at the closet first, then lowered his eyes to look at her. Wen Qingli is not short, she is nearly 1.7 meters tall, and now she is wearing high heels. However, Gu Tingyao's height was over 1.9 meters, so now when he stood in front of her, Wen Qingli felt very oppressive. Fortunately, she was already used to this feeling, and immediately recovered and said, I was just thinking about work and forgot to go out for a moment. Really? Gu Tingyao's voice was indistinguishable. Then why don't you dare look at me? Wen Qingli looked up at him with a calm expression. Gu Tingyao looked at her coldly and said, don't open my closet without permission in the future. Wen Qingli's throat tightened, and she said, okay, Mr. Gu. She understood. Isn't it said that first love is very important to men? Although this gift was placed in the corner of the closet, it could be seen that it was well preserved. Gu Tingyao must have cherished it very much and didn't want others to see it. I'm going out first. Wen Qingli said this in a low voice and prepared to leave. However, she had only taken a few steps when there was a sudden crack sound under her feet. Then she lost her balance and fell to the side. Just when she thought she was about to have an intimate contact with the ground, someone suddenly grabbed her wrist. At the critical moment, she fell into a broad embrace. The weight of her entire body rested on him. Although there was clothing between them, Wen Qingli could still clearly feel the warmth coming from the man's body. Her body stiffened and she quickly tried to get out of his arms. But he suddenly exerted a little force to prevent her from pulling away, and said in a deep voice, don't move. Gu, Mr. Gu. Wen Qingli's scalp felt numb. Did Gu Tingyao think that she was throwing herself into his arms on purpose? Stand firm. Gu Tingyao said, do you still want to fall? After he said this, Wen Qingli gradually came back to his senses. Just now, the heel of her high heel must have broken. Gu Tingyao was afraid that she would fall, so he didn't let her go. Wen Qingli tried hard not to let his face get hot, steadied himself, and said, thank you, Mr. Gu. I'm standing firm now. After she finished speaking, Gu Tingyao immediately let her go. Wen Qingli looked down at the shoes on his feet. Although a broken heel was not a big deal, it happened in front of Gu Tingyao after all, so she still felt a little embarrassed. Gu Tingyao's eyes also fell on her broken heel and he frowned slightly. What kind of shoes are of such poor quality? I'll go out and find some glue to stick it on. Wen Qingli said. What if it's not glued firmly? Do you want to break it again? Gu Tingyao frowned, wait here. After saying that, he walked out of the office directly. Mr. Gu. Wen Qingli wanted to call him, but Gu Tingyao didn't even turn his head. Not long after, he came back. I'll have someone send over a pair of new shoes. Gu Tingyao said, just wait here. Here? What else? Gu Tingyao asked, do you think it's appropriate to go out wearing shoes like this? That's true. After all, she is Gu Tingyao's chief secretary. Now it's work time again. If she got into trouble, it would be a disgrace to Gu Tingyao. Wen Qingli fell silent, and Gu Tingyao didn't say anything either. There seemed to be an awkward atmosphere in the lounge. The boss and the secretary, during working hours, in the office lounge. If I tell this to others, it will probably make people think a lot. You? Gu Tingyao spoke again, but only said this one word. Wen Qingli looked at him puzzledly. Gu Tingyao wanted to talk to her about what happened during this period, but as soon as he opened his mouth, he suddenly felt dry in the mouth. Also, why is it so hot in the lounge? He pulled at his tie and said, nothing. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't control the inexplicable restlessness, and before he knew it, his eyes fell on her red lips. Chapter 25. That woman still needs to be investigated. The scene of kissing that woman that night suddenly emerged in his mind. He was not conscious at that time. Now I suddenly recall clearly how I felt at that time. However, the woman's face was still blurry. Gu Tingyao suddenly realized that this was not the first time he thought of the woman that night in front of Wen Qingli. This is too strange. Could it be that? An idea popped into Gu Tingyao's mind. But then he felt that this idea was too absurd. Just as the two were silent, Wen Qingli's cell phone rang. The ringtone instantly broke the ambiguous and awkward atmosphere. Wen Qingli felt as if he had been pardoned. He quickly took out his phone and answered it. Hello. The person on the other end of the phone said something, and Wen Qingli's expression became serious. Are you sure? Okay, I understand. After hanging up the phone, Wen Qingli said, Mr. Gu, the person who set you up that night has been found. Who? It's Du Xian. The air pressure around Gu Tingyao dropped instantly. Wen Qingli knew that he was angry, but he was not angry at her, so she continued, I found out that after that night, a waiter resigned the next day. I asked people to track her down, and when we found her, she said that a man gave her money and asked her to tamper with your wine. Coincidentally, there was a very hidden surveillance camera at the place where the man met her, and they probably didn't find it, so they didn't destroy the surveillance there. After I asked people to check the surveillance there, I found that the man was from the Du group. Is there any other evidence? Gu Tingyao asked. After all, Du Xian is the daughter of the Du family. If there is no solid evidence, we cannot just accuse her. And more. Wen Qingli said, I had someone check the bottle of wine you drank and found a drug in it. This drug is expensive and rare, so it can only be purchased from abroad. In the past 3 months, the only person who bought this drug from abroad was Du Xian's good friend, Lin Yunqiao. Also, the night you were in the hotel, Du Xian was also in the hotel, and she stayed in a room very close to you. But that night, Du Xian's grandmother suddenly fell ill, so she rushed to the hospital. One piece of evidence is related to Du Xian, which may be a coincidence. But it's impossible that all these happenings are coincidences. Gu Tingyao sneered twice and said, the Du family is really great. Mrs. Gu has been trying to match him up with Du Xian. If she knew that their daughter-in-law she liked actually drugged her son, I wonder how she would feel. When he was angry, Wen Qingli was also thinking about something. What she was wondering was why Xiao Yu sent her a message asking her to buy a condom for Gu Tingyao. Was this also arranged by Du Xian? But why her? But she didn't dare tell Gu Tingyao what she was thinking. If she said it, Gu Tingyao would most likely suspect that she was the woman that night. Just as she was thinking this, Gu Tingyao suddenly said, so, the woman who entered my room that night was not Du Xian, nor was she from Shanghai International. If they were people from Shanghai International, it would be impossible that there has been no movement until now. Shanghai International has a grudge against him now. If they had this leverage in their hands, they would have come to threaten him long ago. Wen Qingli felt a click in his heart. What you think will come true? Let's go find out who it is. Gu Tingyao said. Before, he thought that this woman was either related to Shanghai International or to the person who framed him. But now it seems, that might be an innocent woman. In any case, it is better to find out who it is. His words almost made Wen Qingli's scalp explode. Didn't you say before that you wouldn't check it? Although she found out that Du Xian was the mastermind this time, and she avenged herself for being framed before, it seemed that she had also dragged herself into the water. Secretary Wen. Gu Tingyao looked at her with complicated eyes, is there any problem? Only then did Wen Qingli realize that he had not responded to Gu Tingyao's words just now. She quickly said, there's nothing wrong, Mr. Gu, it's just that, the hotel's surveillance video that night has been destroyed, and no one in the hotel saw anyone enter your room, so it may be difficult to check. Really? Gu Tingyao's tone was meaningful. Ever since Wen Qingli became his chief, it's a pair of high heels. Anna said. Also, Secretary Wen has not come out since he entered Mr. Gu's office just now. Anna's original intention was to make Wen Xiaoyan give up as soon as possible. But Wen Xiaoyan's attention was all on Wen Qingli. No wonder Wen Qingli didn't let her get close to Mr. Gu. It turned out that this bitch had hooked up with Mr. Gu first. Har, just wait and see, after Rao Zhenghao has finished playing with Wen Qingli, see if President Gu will still want her. Chapter 26 Wen Xiaoyan's design. Wen Qingli came out of Gu Tingyao's office wearing new shoes. The heels of these shoes are not very high and are quite comfortable to wear. When she came out, her expression was normal, but the people in the president's office were secretly looking at her. Wen Qingli had been in there for quite some time just now. Gu Tingyao also had someone send in a pair of new shoes. What exactly happened in the office during this time? Fortunately, what they gave me were new shoes. If they had been given new clothes, they would have been able to indulge in even more fanciful ideas. Wen Qingli naturally noticed the gazes of others. But she didn't have the mind to think about that now. Gu Tingyao asked her to check the woman that night again. But the woman that night was herself. How should she explain to Gu Tingyao in the end? When Wen Qingli thought of this, he felt cold all over. After a long while, she came to her senses and was getting ready to work when her cell phone rang again. She took a look and saw that it was a call from Lu Fang. She didn't want to answer the call, so she just hung up. Unexpectedly, Lu Fang kept calling several times. Wen Qingli was not tired of it and had to pick up the phone. What's the matter? Qingli, are you at work? I hope I didn't disturb you. Lu Fang asked enthusiastically. Wen Qingli was almost annoyed by her. She knew it was working hours, but she still kept calling. Tell me what's going on. Tomorrow is your dad's birthday, you didn't forget it, did you? Wen Qingli didn't forget, but when Jianhua, the gambler, had broken her heart, so she didn't plan to celebrate when Jianhua's birthday. Seeing that she didn't say anything, Lu Fang continued, I know you're still angry with your father, but he is your biological father after all, right? Come back for dinner tomorrow night. Your father said he will cook your favorite dishes for you. Wen Qingli was silent for a while, then said, I understand. Firstly, he was indeed her biological father. Secondly, if she didn't go back, with Wen Jianhua's temper, who knows what kind of trouble he would cause. Anyway, she was just going back to have a meal and would leave after eating, so it was no big deal. Okay, then we'll wait for you to come back for dinner tomorrow night. Lu Fang said with a smile. Wen Qingli didn't say anything and just hung up the phone. The next evening, when it was time to get off work, Wen Qingli packed up his things and prepared to leave. At this time, Wen Xiaoyan came over and said to her with a smile, let's go home together. Wen Qingli looked at her suspiciously. At this moment, she almost thought that Wen Xiaoyan and she were good sisters with a deep relationship. But from childhood to adulthood, Wen Xiaoyan had never made things difficult for her, so why was she suddenly so nice to her? Why are you looking at me like that? Aren't we going home to celebrate Dad's birthday today? It's just right, we can go home together. Wen Xiaoyan said harmlessly, if you share the car with me, I can save some taxi fare. Forget it then. Wen Qingli said calmly, I'll take the subway. Then I'll take the subway with you, let's go. Before Wen Xiaoyan could finish her words, the intercom on Wen Qingli's desk suddenly rang. She pressed the answer button, and Gu Tingyao's voice rang out, come in. Okay, Mr. Gu. After hanging up the phone, Wen Qingli said to Wen Xiaoyan, did you hear that? I may have to work overtime for a while, you go first. Wen Xiaoyan was very reluctant. Firstly, she was afraid that Wen Qingli would not come home tonight. Secondly, she was jealous that Wen Qingli could be alone with Gu Tingyao again. Then I'll wait for you here, she said. Wen Qingli felt that Wen Xiaoyan was really bored today, but she was too lazy to care and walked into Gu Tingyao's office. More than 2 hours had passed since they finished their work. Wen Qingli and Gu Tingyao walked out together and saw Wen Xiaoyan still waiting outside. Her face was already full of impatience, but when she saw Gu Tingyao, she smiled like a flower, Boss Gu. Gu Tingyao ignored her and turned to Wen Qingli and said, it's late. Let the driver take you home. Since he had already said so, Wen Qingli didn't want to refuse in a pretentious manner, not to mention that she really didn't want to go home with Wen Xiaoyan. So she nodded and said, okay. Wen Xiaoyan quickly asked, what about me? As soon as she opened her mouth, Gu Tingyao's cold gaze fell on her face. She was so frightened that she fell silent and dared not ask any more questions. After leaving the company, Wen Xiaoyan could only watch Wen Qingli and Gu Tingyao get into the car together. The car drove away quickly, leaving her alone in the cold wind. She was so angry that she almost broke her teeth, but when she thought about what was going to happen tonight, she felt a little better. She quickly took out her cell phone, edited a text message, and sent it to Rao Zhenghao. After Wen Qingli got in the car, he told the driver the address of Wen Jian was home. Aren't you going back to your apartment today? Gu Tingyao asked. Wen Qingli said truthfully, today is my dad's birthday, I'm going back to see him. Although it is quite late now, it is not yet past 12 o'clock. If she promised to go back and then didn't, Wen Jianhua would definitely make a fuss. Gu Tingyao curled his lips, and his smile seemed a little sarcastic. Wen Qingli understood. Last time, Du Xian said in front of Gu Tingyao that her father owed gambling debts. Such a gambler father is indeed laughable. Wen Jianhua's home is in an old residential area and cars can enter, so the driver parked directly downstairs of Wen Jianhua's home. Wen Qingli got out of the car and thanked Gu Tingyao. Gu Tingyao didn't say anything and asked the driver to drive away. As soon as Wen Qingli entered the house, Lu Fang came to greet him immediately. Qingli, why did you come back so late? Hey, where's Xiaoyun? Didn't she come back with you? Overtime. Wen Qingli said lightly, and did not respond to why Wen Xiaoyun did not come back with her. HMPH, you knew today was my birthday, so why couldn't you come back earlier? Wen Jianhua said unhappily. Wen Qingli sneered, if I lose this job, will you support me? You? Alright, on this wonderful day, you two should stop arguing. The food is getting cold. I'll go heat it up. After a while, Wen Xiaoyun came back. But she did not come back alone, Rao Zhenghao was also with her. Dad, Mom, this is my boyfriend. He came back with me today to celebrate Dad's birthday. Wen Xiaoyun introduced. Hey, please come in, please come in. Lu Fang invited Rao Zhenghao in with a smile on her face. Rao Zhenghao brought 2 bottles of very expensive wine to Wen Jianhua, which immediately made Wen Jianhua smile happily. But Wen Qingli didn't feel well. Because, ever since Rao Zhenghao entered the room, his eyes have been glued to her. That obscene look made her feel disgusted. After dinner, Wen Qingli was about to leave, but Lu Fang stopped her. Qingli, we haven't cut the cake yet, please sit for a while. By the way, the cake is still in the cake shop downstairs, I'll go down and get it now. After Lu Fang finished speaking, he left in a hurry. Wen Qingli felt something was not right. At this time, how could a cake shop still be open? She stood up and was about to leave, but Wen Xiaoyan suddenly said, oh, sister, Dad seems drunk, let's help him to his room to sleep. Wen Qingli looked back and saw that Wen Jianhua was indeed drunk and lying on the table. She frowned slightly, walked over, and helped Wen Jianhua up with Wen Xiaoyan. They had just helped Wen Jianhua into the bedroom and walked to the bed when Wen Jianhua suddenly opened his eyes. Wen Qingli's expression changed. He's not drunk. Chapter 27. Enjoy yourself tonight. In a flash, something seemed to flash through Wen Qingli's mind. She immediately let go of Wen Jianhua and turned to walk out. Wen Xiaoyan suddenly jumped over and blocked her way. My dear sister, where are you going in such a hurry? Wen Xiaoyan raised a strange smile, now that you are here, it won't be easy to get out. Wen Qingli tensed up and looked at her warily, what do you mean? At this moment, the door of the room was pushed open again from the outside. The person who walked in was Rao Zhenghao. At this moment, his face was full of excitement, and his obscene eyes kept scanning Wen Qingli. Xiaoyun, you really do what you say. Wen Xiaoyan sneered and said, of course, enjoy yourself tonight. Wen Qingli naturally understood what they meant. She was so angry that her whole body was shaking. She turned around to look at Wen Jianhua, only to see that he was avoiding her gaze and didn't dare to look at her at all. With a loud boom, something in Wen Qingli's heart seemed to collapse completely. Judging from Wen Jianhua's appearance, he was also involved in what happened today. In other words, he had known Wen Xiaoyan's plan for a long time. Not only does he know, he is also cooperating with her. Otherwise, why did he pretend to be drunk and trick her into their house? Dad. Wen Qingli's voice was trembling. Are you crazy? Isn't she doing well enough as a daughter? She is the chief secretary of the person in charge of GU Group. Salary, company benefits, various bonuses. If it weren't for paying off Wen Jianhuo's debt, she would have lived a carefree life now. However, Wen Jianhuo has now teamed up with others to push her into the fire pit. Qingli, don't blame Dad. Wen Jianhuo said with an embarrassed look, Mr. Rao said that he really likes you and he will marry you. When the time comes, he will give our family 800,000 yuan as a betrothal gift. You won't lose out if you marry him, right? Anyway, you are not young anymore, so have a good discussion with Mr. Rao tonight about your relationship. After saying that, he jumped out of the room like a rabbit. Wen Qingli's eyes were red and his fingers were clenched tightly together. Money, money again. Before, Wen Jianhuo asked her to go on a blind date with an older man for money. This time it was for money again, and he actually sent her into the hands of a hungry wolf. This is her good father. Wen Qingli, I found a good home for you, no need to thank me. After Wen Xiaoyan finished speaking, she turned around and wanted to walk out. Wen Qingli suddenly raised his hand and grabbed her hair. Wen Xiaoyan screamed in pain, Wen Qingli, let me go. Are you crazy? Wen Qingli didn't say anything, he just pulled her hair hard. Wen Xiaoyan was in so much pain that she felt like her scalp was about to be torn off by Wen Qingli. Rao Zhenghao, what are you doing? Come and help me. Rao Zhenghao had just been confused by Wen Qingli's sudden ruthlessness. He came back to his senses now, rushed over, and pushed Wen Qingli's shoulder hard. No matter how ruthless Wen Qingli was, he could not match the strength of a man. She staggered due to the push, and the pain in her shoulder made her lose some strength in her hands. Wen Xiaoyan took the opportunity to escape from her and ran out of the room. Now, she and Rao Zhenghao were the only ones left in the room. Hee. Rao Zhenghao laughed obscenely twice, I didn't expect that you are still a hottie. Now, I like you even more. Wen Qingli steadied himself and said seriously, aren't you Wen Xiaoyan's boyfriend? What's going on now? Wen Xiaoyan. I was just playing with her. But you are different. You are so beautiful. I really like you. Don't worry, it's not impossible for me to marry you. What he said made Wen Qingli feel so sick. Seeing Rao Zhenghao rushing towards her again, she quickly dodged, while her eyes kept searching the room for something that could help her control herself. However, Wen Xiaoyan seemed to be prepared and took away all the offensive objects in the room. Don't struggle. Just obey me. I can let you enjoy yourself. Of course, if you insist on playing this kind of game with me, I can accept it. Looking at the ferocious Rao Zhenghao, Wen Qingli said, do you know who I am? I am the chief secretary of Mr. Gu of GU Group. She never liked to bully others by taking advantage of her power, but now, in order to protect herself, she could only borrow Gu Tingyao's power. GU Group. Rao Zhenghao was stunned for a moment, then burst into laughter again, har har har. Then don't you know that my father is a senior executive of GU Group? So what if you are someone close to Mr. GU, aren't you just a secretary? When the time comes, I will ask my dad to talk to Mr. GU. Will Mr. GU not give my dad this face? Hearing her say this, Wen Qingli immediately thought of Deputy Director Rao of the Human Resources Department of GU Group. No wonder he strongly recommended Wen Xiaoyan to join the CEO's office. It turns out that he is Rao Zhenghao's father. You're breaking the law. Then go ahead and sue me. I'll say that we were originally a couple and we just had a conflict. Even your family will stand by me and testify for me. Who would believe you? After saying this, Rao Zhenghao seemed to have completely lost his patience and quickly pounced on Wen Qingli. Wen Qingli wanted to hide, but the room was so small that she had no time to dodge. Rao Zhenghao grabbed her arm and threw her onto the bed. Wen Qingli reacted quickly and wanted to sit up immediately, but Rao Zhenghao had already suppressed her fiercely and started tearing her clothes. Let me go. Wen Qingli struggled desperately. Perhaps because she struggled too violently, Rao Zhenghao was unable to succeed for a while, and out of anger and humiliation, he slapped her in the face. Bitch! I wanted to be gentle with you, but you are so ungrateful. Don't blame me for being merciless. He used all his strength in this slap, and Wen Qingli only felt a burning pain on his cheek and a buzzing sound in his head. With a rip sound, her shirt was torn open by Rao Zhenghao, and her snow-white skin was immediately exposed to the air. This scene severely stimulated Rao Zhenghao's eyes. His eyes were turning green, and he lowered his head to kiss Wen Qingli, but Wen Qingli quickly turned her head away. Rao Zhenghao then reached out to pry open her chin, trying to straighten her face. Wen Qingli suddenly felt a surge of despair in his heart. Now only Wen Jianwo and Wen Xiaoyan are outside. There was no way they could come to save her. She has tried her best. Do we really want to let Rao Zhenghao succeed? Seeing that Rao Zhenghao's stinky mouth was about to get close to him, Wen Qingli was filled with despair. However, at this moment, the door of the room was suddenly kicked open. Chapter 28. It's okay, don't be afraid. The loud noise startled Rao Zhenghao. Before he could turn around to see who it was, he was pulled up by a strong force. Then he felt a pain on his scalp as someone grabbed his hair. Who is it? Who dares to touch me? Before he could finish his words, the person behind him slammed his head against the wall. Rao Zhenghao suddenly saw stars and couldn't utter a single syllable. And this man didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. He banged his head against the wall several times in a row, each time with fatal force. Rao Zhenghao had no power to resist and could only be beaten. Wen Qingli escaped from danger, gasping heavily. She didn't expect someone to come to rescue her, and she didn't expect that the person who came was Gu Tingyao. Seeing that Gu Tingyao really wanted to kill Rao Zhenghao, she quickly shouted, "Boss Gu, don't do that." To be honest, she wished Rao Zhenghao would die right now. However, she didn't want Gu Tingyao to lose his life because of her. Gu Tingyao's face was covered with frost at this moment, and the hostility he exuded was extremely terrifying. However, after hearing Wen Qingli's voice, he stopped. After throwing the half-dead Rao Zhenghao away like a piece of dirty stuff, Gu Tingyao walked to the bed, took off his coat, and put it on Wen Qingli. Wen Qingli's body was still shaking. Gu Tingyao took a deep breath to make his voice less angry, then said, "It's okay, don't be afraid." "Mr. Gu, how could you?" Wen Qingli spoke incoherently. Gu Tingyao looked at her red and swollen face and said in a deep voice, "I'll take you to the hospital first." Wen Qingli did not refuse. She just wanted to leave this house as soon as possible. Gu Tingyao gently put his arm around her shoulders, helped her up, and led her out of the room. Wen Jianwo and Wen Xiaoyan were both in the living room, and Lu Fang had also returned. At this moment, the three men were all pale and trembling, not daring to even look at the two of them. Especially Wen Xiaoyan. She never expected that Gu Tingyao would come just now. When she heard the knock on the door just now, she was wondering who would come so late. Unexpectedly, when I opened the door, the person standing outside was Gu Tingyao. If it were any other time, she would have been overjoyed if Gu Tingyao showed up at her doorstep. But now, Wen Qingli and Rao Zhenghao are in the bedroom. Before she could say anything, Wen Qingli's scream was heard from the bedroom. Wen Xiaoyan clearly saw that Gu Tingyao's face changed instantly, then he strode to the bedroom door, kicked it open and rushed in. When Gu Tingyao helped Wen Qingli out, Wen Qingli was wearing Gu Tingyao's coat, but his pants were still intact. Wen Xiaoyan knew that Rao Zhenghao had not succeeded at all. This waste. But the more important question now is, how will Gu Tingyao treat them? Judging from Gu Tingyao's expression, he clearly cares about Wen Qingli a lot. Wen Xiaoyan was scared and jealous, and she was almost driven crazy. However, Gu Tingyao ignored them and just took Wen Qingli away. After the two of them left, Wen Xiaoyan rushed into their house. Seeing Rao Zhenghao fainted on the ground with blood all over his head, she screamed in fear. "It's all over now." Gu Tingyao took Wen Qingli downstairs. The driver was waiting downstairs. When he saw Wen Qingli's appearance, he was startled and asked quickly, "Are you okay, Secretary Wen?" "I'm fine." Wen Qingli had recovered by now. She said to Gu Tingyao, "Mr. Gu, thank you for what I just said. Please take me back to the apartment. There's no need to go to the hospital." Gu Tingyao said calmly, "Your face and neck should be checked out by the hospital." After he said this, Wen Qingli felt a little pain in his neck. She raised her hand and touched it, and felt a little blood. It seemed that Rao Zhenghao scratched her neck when she struggled just now. "Get in the car," Gu Tingyao said again. Wen Qingli really didn't want to be alone at the moment, so she and Gu Tingyao got in the car. The driver started the car and drove towards the hospital. Wen Qingli leaned back in the chair tiredly, her mind full of Rao Zhenghao's wretched and hideous face, her body still trembling slightly. I'm afraid she will never forget the feeling of despair and fear she just felt for a long time. At this moment, there was suddenly some warmth on the back of her hand. Wen Qingli turned her head and saw Gu Tingyao's hand was on the back of her hand. But at this moment, there was no ambiguity in his action, only concern and comfort. It's okay now, he said softly. Hearing his words, Wen Qingli's nose suddenly felt sore and tears almost fell. She forced herself to hold back her tears and asked, why did Mr. Gu suddenly go to that place just now? She no longer wanted to call that place my home. Your pen fell on my car, Gu Tingyao said. He remembered that Wen Qingli had carried this pen with him for several years. It should be important to her. In fact, he could have given it to her tomorrow at the company. But after thinking about it, he asked the driver to return to the downstairs of Wen Qingli's home. Coincidentally, an ant came out of the apartment door of Wen Qingli's home. After asking around, he found out which household Wen Qingli lived in. In fact, he didn't know why he went to Wen Qingli's house to return the pen to her. Perhaps, he wanted to let her know that he was willing to help her. Or maybe, she wanted to warn her gambler father not to cause trouble for Wen Qingli again. But no matter what, he was standing at the door of Wen Qingli's house. He was extremely glad at this moment that he went. Otherwise, what would happen next, he really didn't dare to think about it. When he thought of the scene he saw when he rushed in, Gu Tingyao wished he could tear Rao Zhenghao into pieces. He took a deep breath, calmed the anger that was rising in his heart, then took out a pen and handed it to Wen Qingli. Wen Qingli took it and said, "Thank you, Mr. Gu." She said thank you not only for the pen, but also for Gu Tingyao saving her just now. No need, Gu Tingyao said with a stern face, you are my secretary. Bullying you is like slapping me in the face. This sentence is also his explanation for why he is so angry with himself. Wen Qingli lowered his eyes, looked at the pen in his hand, smiled bitterly and said, I'm really sorry. I made a fool of myself. She was actually being bullied like that in her own home. Her so-called family were just outside the door, listening to her screams, unmoved. Lu Fang and Wen Xiaoyan are fine. But Wen Zhenhua, he is her father. Wen Qingli closed his eyes, his eyelashes trembling slightly. This kind of thing is really a huge joke. Gu Tingyao said coldly, it's not a joke, but you'd better not go back to that kind of place in the future. Chapter 29. Is this your boyfriend? I won't go back, Wen Qingli said softly. Gu Tingyao didn't say anything else, and soon the car stopped in front of the hospital. It's late now, but there is a doctor on duty at the hospital. The doctor examined Wen Qingli and said that it was just a skin injury and nothing serious. He prescribed some medicine for her and said that she would be fine after applying it for 2 days. He also reminded her of some precautions. Wen Qingli listened to the doctor in silence. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Gu Tingyao say, thank you. You're welcome, the doctor said, looking him over with a strange look in his eyes. Just when Wen Qingli was puzzled, Gu Tingyao's cell phone rang. He went out to answer the phone, and the doctor immediately asked, do you need me to call the police for you? Wen Qingli shuddered. Did the doctor see that she was almost? That man just now was your boyfriend, right? Looking at your face, you were obviously beaten. And the wound on your neck was also caused by someone scratching you. Did he abuse you? The doctor said worriedly, when you encounter such things, you must be brave enough to say no. You must not endure it. Wen Qingli was stunned for a moment, and then said with a smile, no, you misunderstood, he is not my boyfriend, and my injuries were not caused by him. On the contrary, he saved me. Oh, so that's how it is. The doctor was a little embarrassed. I was wondering, how could such a handsome guy do such a thing? But thank you anyway, Wen Qingli said with a smile. You're welcome. My daughter is about your age and is working in another city. Sometimes, I'm really worried about her, afraid that she'll be bullied. The doctor chatted with her for a few words and didn't notice that Wen Qingli's eyes were full of bitterness and loss. It is said that parents in the world are the most compassionate and there is no parent who does not love their children. But she just happens to have a father like Wen Zhenhua. After a while, Gu Tingyao came back after finishing his phone call. The doctor gave them a prescription and asked them to get the medicine. After coming out, Gu Tingyao asked Wen Qingli to sit on the bench in the corridor for a while he went to get it. Mr. Gu, I'll go by myself. Wen Qingli said anxiously. How could Gu Tingyao have ever done such a thing to anyone? Gu Tingyao glanced at her and said calmly, I've come with you to the checkup, and it's not a big deal to walk a few steps. Do I look lazy? Wen Qingli said angrily, that's not what I meant. Then sit still. When Gu Tingyao came back with the medicine, he saw a young male doctor in a white coat standing in front of Wen Qingli and chatting with her. The male doctor's face was full of courtesy, and no one knew what he said, but it made Wen Qingli laugh. Gu Tingyao's eyes darkened and he strode over. He walked to Wen Qingli, without even looking at the male doctor, and said coldly, let's go. Oh, okay. Wen Qingli stood up immediately. The male doctor was stunned for a moment when he saw Gu Tingyao, and then asked tentatively, is this your boyfriend? Wen Qingli was about to say no when she suddenly heard Gu Tingyao say impatiently, are you not leaving yet? Well, he is the boss and he is the boss. Wen Qingli smiled politely at the male doctor, then left with Gu Tingyao. The male doctor looked at her back with a look of regret. After leaving the hospital and getting in the car, Gu Tingyao threw the medicine to Wen Qingli. Wen Qingli took the medicine, looked at him carefully, and asked, Mr. Gu, did anything happen when you took the medicine just now? No. Gu Tingyao said coldly. Wen Qingli thought, then why do you look like someone has offended you? The driver seemed to realize that something was wrong and quietly raised the partition inside the car, fearing that Gu Tingyao's anger would affect him. After the car drove for a while, Gu Tingyao suddenly asked, do you know the male doctor just now? Wen Qingli was distracted, and Gu Tingyao's sudden question almost scared her. Coming back to his senses, Wen Qingli said, I don't know him. Then why are you chatting so happily? Gu Tingyao sneered, I see you are smiling like a flower. Wen Qingli said with a smile, how could I? That was clearly a polite smile. Just now she was sitting there waiting for Gu Tingyao, and the male doctor came over and started chatting with her. She was just being polite from beginning to end. How did Gu Tingyao know that she smiled like a flower? Hearing her words, Gu Tingyao frowned and recalled how she looked just now. But no matter how he recalled it, he always felt that she smiled very brightly. Gu Tingyao was very upset, but when he thought about what Wen Qingli had experienced tonight, he didn't want to be cold to her anymore, so he softened his tone, talk less to strange men in the future. You are right. Wen Qingli said, but if I stay with you, I will inevitably have to do business with strange men. That's different. Gu Tingyao said. Can it be the same with him around? But Wen Qingli didn't quite understand, what was the difference? Forget it, what the boss said is the imperial decree, not to mention that he was the boss who just saved her. After a while, Wen Qingli spoke again, anyway, thank you so much tonight, Mr. Gu. I can't think of how to repay you. I can only work harder in the future. After all, Gu Tingyao lacks nothing. She racked her brains, but the only way she could think of to repay him was to work harder in the future. Gu Tingyao snorted and laughed, saying, it's my duty to work hard, but I didn't save you just to get you to repay me. I know. Wen Qingli said quickly, you are kind-hearted and chivalrous. That's enough. Gu Tingyao said expressionlessly. Wen Qingli coughed twice and stopped his flattery. The car was parked downstairs of the apartment building. Wen Qingli had just opened the car door and was about to get out, but when she saw the pitch-black night outside, she subconsciously shrank back. From the hospital till now, there has been someone with her, so she feels okay. But now, facing the endless night alone, she suddenly felt a sense of fear gradually spreading. Gu Tingyao's eyes flickered slightly. He got out of the car first, then walked around to Wen Qingli and said, get out of the car. I'll take you upstairs. His words suddenly made Wen Qingli feel much more at ease. Gu Tingyao and Wen Qingli took the elevator upstairs together, and then walked her all the way to her doorstep. Wen Qingli entered the password and opened the door. After thinking for a while, she asked, Mr. Gu, would you like to come in and sit down? She originally wanted to ask Gu Tingyao to come in and sit down and have a glass of water out of politeness and gratitude, but as soon as she asked this, she suddenly felt a little awkward. It was as if she was inviting him. No need. Gu Tingyao said calmly, you should rest early. I'll give you a few days off to recuperate. Chapter 30 The bullying has come to me. Wen Qingli nodded and said, "Thank you, Mr. Gu. Gu Tingyao said nothing more and turned to leave. Wen Qingli closed the door and went to the bathroom first. Although Rao Zhenghao didn't really do anything to her, his dirty hands did touch her, and Wen Qingli felt disgusted. After entering the bathroom, she took a thorough bath and finally stopped when she felt her skin was about to break. Coming out of the bathroom wrapped in a bathrobe, Wen Qingli saw the medicine on the coffee table. She walked to the sofa and sat down, reaching out to take the medicine, but suddenly became dazed. Today's Gu Tingyao was really a little beyond her expectations. Not only did he save her, he also took her to the hospital, got her medicine, and sent her home. They even sent her to her doorstep and told her they would give her a few days off. She has been with him for 5 years and always thought that he was cold and indifferent and didn't care much about other people's affairs. But now it seems that this is not entirely the case. After coming to his senses, Wen Qingli applied medicine on himself. The medicine felt cool when applied to her skin, but her heart didn't seem so cold anymore. Gu Tingyao came down from upstairs and just got into the car when he received a call. He picked up the phone and asked calmly, "What's going on?" "Boss Gu, we have that man in our hands." It was Yinbei's voice on the other end of the line. He kept shouting that his father was a senior executive at Gu's group. "I checked and found out that he is indeed the son of the deputy director of the Human Resources Department at Gu's group." Gu Tingyao sneered. His voice gave Yinbei goosebumps all over his body. "Then, what should we do now?" Yinbei asked. "Since he is the son of an acquaintance, then invite this acquaintance as well." Gu Tingyao said coldly. "Okay, I understand." Half an hour later, Gu Tingyao was sitting on the sofa in the club's box, with Yinbei standing behind him. The deputy director of the Human Resources Department, Rao Wenshan, stood in front of him, his face pale and not daring to breathe. His son Rao Zhenghao collapsed at his feet. Rao Zhenghao's head had been bandaged, but it looked hastily done, probably to prevent his blood from flowing everywhere. Rao Wenshan felt very distressed, but looking at Gu Tingyao's expression, he didn't dare to care about his son. After he came here, he roughly guessed one thing: Rao Zhenghao must have offended Gu Tingyao somehow. This little bastard is so bold that he dares to offend anyone. More than 10 minutes had passed and Gu Tingyao still hadn't spoken. Rao Wenshan felt like he was on edge. He pondered for a while and couldn't help but ask, "Boss Gu, what happened?" "You ask me." Gu Tingyao raised the corner of his lips coldly. "You should ask your good son if he is dissatisfied with me. He has bullied me." Rao Wenshan was horrified and said quickly, "Boss Gu, this must be a misunderstanding. He wouldn't dare to do that. My son is a jerk, but he would never dare to offend you. If he did anything wrong, it must have been unintentional. Please show mercy and forgive him this time." Gu Tingyao said nothing, just looked at him coldly. Rao Wenshan broke out in cold sweat when he looked at him. Want Gu Tingyao to show mercy? This is basically unlikely. He gritted his teeth, forced himself to harden his heart, and kicked Rao Zhenghao hard. "You evil creature! Tell me, what good thing have you done? Why don't you apologize to Mr. Gu right now?" Rao Zhenghao is still confused at this moment. After being kicked by Rao Wenshan, he just mumbled a few words that were completely inaudible. No matter how reluctant Rao Wenshan was, he could only kick him a few more times. He now only hoped that Gu Tingyao would spare them both because of his cruelness. Rao Zhenghao uttered ouch twice, but he was also weak. "Mr. Gu, what did this kid do wrong? Please tell me, I will definitely teach him a lesson." Rao Wenshan said in fear and trepidation. "I didn't call you here to answer your questions or solve your doubts," said Gu Tingyao. Rao Wenshan's eyes went dark. It seemed that Gu Tingyao was really angry. What he had just done was not enough to calm Gu Tingyao's anger. It's all over now. Rao Zhenghao had done a lot of ridiculous things in the past, but he was able to cover them up, either by intimidation or bribery, and the victims could only swallow their bitterness. But now, Rao Zhenghao has offended Gu Tingyao. How can he deal with this? No matter what, Rao Zhenghao is his son. If the son is not well educated, it is the father's fault. If it were not for his indulgence and doting, Rao Zhenghao would not have done those ridiculous things again and again. "Boss Gu, Gu Tingyao said impatiently, Since you can't explain your son's affairs clearly, let's talk about your affairs first. Rao Wenshan's heart skipped a beat, but he looked innocent. My business. Mr. Gu, what's my business? Gu Tingyao sneered, as if laughing at his pretending to be stupid. Yinbei had already thrown a folder on the table and said expressionlessly, Deputy Director Rao, this is the record of how you have abused your position for personal gain over the past month. Rao Wenshan's brain suddenly buzzed. He has been working in GU Group for more than 10 years and became the Deputy Director of the Human Resources Department 6 years ago. Perhaps because he is a veteran, he has started to have his own little ideas in the past 2 years. But he didn't start implementing it until a month ago, and he did it very secretly. How come Gu Tingyao knew everything? You're doing this under my nose, Rao Wenshan. Do you think too highly of yourself, or do you think too lowly of me? Gu Tingyao's tone was very gentle, but to Rao Wenshan, it sounded like a death sentence. He said with a look of dejection, Boss Gu, I know I was wrong. I have never done this kind of thing before. I only started doing it recently. Please forgive me for my hard work for the company over the years. If I let you off, tomorrow this senior executive will do the same thing, and the day after tomorrow another senior executive will be even more excessive than you. Should I let them all off just because they work hard and never complain? Rao Wenshan was speechless, with sweat on his face. In fact, there is nothing much to say. He has been working in GU Group for so many years, but over the years, GU Group has never treated him unfairly in terms of salary, bonuses, and various welfare benefits. His son has been doing evil things outside. Isn't he relying on the fact that he is a senior executive of the GU Group? Now that he has done something that damages the interests of the company in order to profit for himself, why should he ask Gu Tingyao to forgive him? He knew all this very well, but he had to find a way out for himself. Rao Wenshan stiffened his neck and said, I want to call Mr. Gu. Mr. Gu is Gu Tingyao's grandfather. He had always been in charge of the Gu family. 5 years ago, he abdicated completely and handed over everything in the Gu family to Gu Tingyao. Mr. Gu once praised Rao Wenshan, saying that he was capable. Now, he can only place all his hopes on Mr. Gu. Chapter 31, Hard Work. Want to get some help from my grandfather? Gu Tingyao's expression remained calm. Don't waste your time on this. Rao Wenshan didn't listen to him. He took out his cell phone tremblingly and called Mr. Gu. But the person who answered the phone was the Gu family's servant, who told him that Mr. Gu was resting now and even if there was a big problem, he could not let an old man get up at this time to help him deal with it. The call was hung up, but Rao Wenshan was still holding the phone, as if he was talking to Gu Tingyao, or as if he was talking to himself. Wait until tomorrow, when Mr. Gu wakes up tomorrow morning, he will definitely forgive me. Gu Tingyao's patience had run out. He said coldly, Rao Wenshan, I'm giving you 2 choices now. Either you fight with the GU Group's legal team, or you take your son and go to Country F and never come back. Rao Wenshan was terrified when he heard this. Letting him compete with the GU Group's legal team would be equivalent to sending him directly to jail, wouldn't it? As far as he knew, Gu's legal team had never lost. But he could go to Country F. He knew very well that Country F was a poor and miserable place, and there had been wars for years. To be honest, this is no different from going to jail. Rao Wenshan's face turned pale and he was speechless. Gu Tingyao stood up from the sofa and said, I'll give you 1 night to think about it. If you still can't make a choice tomorrow morning, don't blame me for choosing for you. After saying that, he walked away. Rao Wenshan watched him walk to the door. His heart began to panic, and he ran over with trembling legs, wanting to beg for mercy, but Yinbei's tall body blocked him. Didn't you understand what Mr. Gu said? Yinbei smiled evilly, if you chase him now, your fate will only be worse. Assistant Yin, please help me, Rao Wenshan begged, please tell Mr. Gu that I will never do such a stupid thing again. Do you think asking President Gu for help will be helpful? What's more, it's not just you now. Your son has also set his sights on Secretary Wen and almost killed her. Do you want President Gu to forgive you? You must be dreaming. Yinbei spoke so calmly, but Rao Wenshan was terrified. Wen, Secretary Wen. No wonder Rao Zhenghao was so miserable today. He is so bold, he dares to touch anyone. However, if you do something like this, Mr. Gu will punish you sooner or later. Yinbei added, Deputy Director Rao, oh no, you are not the Deputy Director now. Rao Wenshan, you'd better not do bad things. After saying that, Yinbei also turned and left. Rao Wenshan was enveloped in despair and collapsed to the ground. He suddenly felt that if Rao Zhenghao had not set his sights on Wen Qingli, perhaps Gu Tingyao would not have been so cruel to him. That's not right. Gu Tingyao has always been cold-blooded and ruthless. Rao Wenshan also couldn't figure it out. How much of Gu Tingyao's anger was because of him and how much was because of Wen Qingli? After leaving the club, Gu Tingyao still felt a lump of anger in his heart. At this time, Yinbei asked him, Boss Gu, then, the surname Wen, do you want to teach the Wen family a lesson as well? Yinbei originally wanted to say the family with the surname Wen, but then he changed his mind and realized that they were Wen Qingli's family after all. Now he didn't know what Gu Tingyao wanted to do, so it was better to be polite. After he said this, Gu Tingyao realized that he was so angry because the Wen family had not yet taught them a lesson. What kind of family members are these? How can they just watch their family members being bullied by outsiders and do nothing from the outside? He suddenly remembered that when he knocked on the Wen family's door today, the person who opened the door for him seemed to be the new assistant who had recently joined the president's office. It turned out that she was from Wen Qingli's family. No wonder Wen Qingli kept saying that she was not suitable. I guess you already know what kind of person she is. Gu Tingyao suddenly felt a little regretful. If he had known that day, he should not have been angry with Wen Qingli and left that woman behind. This feeling of regret made him even more upset. At this moment, he suddenly realized that he had never experienced such a moment since he was 8 years old. Being angry, regretful, it was really outrageous that such a situation happened to him. Mr. Gu. Yinbei was a little surprised to see that he hadn't spoken. Gu Tingyao suppressed his annoyance and said, Go check what's going on at her home first. No matter what, that is Wen Qingli's family. If he acts rashly, what if Wen Qingli hates him? After getting in the car, Gu Tingyao leaned back in the back seat and closed his eyes to rest. Yinbei was sitting in the passenger seat, originally texting and instructing people to do something, when he suddenly heard Gu Tingyao sneer. He was so scared that he almost dropped his phone and asked quickly, Mr. Gu, what's wrong? It's okay. Gu Tingyao said. He just suddenly remembered that Wen Qingli had been secretly accepting money from Madame Gu without his knowledge, and he was still working hard for her here. He was clearly angry with her, but he forgot about it the next moment. So he felt a little ridiculous. Yinbei has been following Gu Tingyao for some years, but at this moment he couldn't figure out what he meant. Gu Tingyao didn't say anything, so he didn't ask any more questions and continued to send his text messages. When he woke up in the morning, Wen Qingli felt much calmer. She wasn't the type to panic when something happened, but what happened last night was so terrifying that she couldn't calm down for a while. But after a good night's sleep, I felt much better. Wen Qingli picked up his phone and saw many calls and messages from Wen Jianhua and Lu Fang. She muted her phone before going to bed last night, so she didn't hear the reminder. Qingli, it's all Dad's fault. Dad is obsessed with money, but Dad really thinks that Rao Zhenghao is a good guy, and Dad is doing this for your own good. Qingli, I'm so glad you're okay. Your father and sister were just confused for a moment. We are family, so you must not bother with them. As for Mr. Gu, please say a few good words for them. If Mr. Gu is unhappy with our family, it won't do you any good, right? Qingli, Rao Zhenghao forced your sister to do this. She has no power or influence, so how dare she disobey Rao Zhenghao? When Qingli glanced at them expressionlessly, then blocked the two people's cell phone numbers and their home landline numbers. From now on, she would just treat them as strangers. Although Gu Tingyao said he would give her a day off, Wen Qingli felt that she was fine, so she still prepared to go to the company. The medicine prescribed by the doctor is very effective. The swelling on the side of her face has now shrunk a lot. If you don't look carefully, you can't see it. Only the wound on the neck is still obvious. After applying the medicine, Wen Qingli found a silk scarf and tied it around it. If she was seen by people in the company, they would inevitably ask her questions, and she was Gu Tingyao's chief secretary, so she still had to pay attention to her image. After arriving at the company, Gu Tingyao saw her and frowned slightly. But he didn't say anything and went straight into the office. Chapter 32, The Cookies She Baked. It's not time to officially go to work yet. After Gu Tingyao entered the office, Wen Qingli hesitated for a moment, but still picked up the small box on the table, then walked to the door and knocked. Enter. Wen Qingli pushed the door open and walked in. Gu Tingyao was already sitting at his desk, looking at his computer. Hearing the door open, he asked without even looking up, "What's going on?" At this moment, he looked the same as he had in the past 5 years, as if he had only appeared in a dream yesterday. But Wen Qingli has gotten used to it. She walked to the table and gently placed the box in her hand on Gu Tingyao's desk. "Boss Gu, this is what I made this morning. Let me give you a try." Gu Tingyao didn't even look at it, he just asked, "What is it?" "I baked these cookies." Hearing this, Gu Tingyao's expression finally changed. He raised his eyes and glanced at Wen Qingli. Wen Qingli felt that the words, "You are crazy," were clearly written in his eyes. She also knew that she was indeed a little crazy to give Gu Tingyao such a thing. But this morning when she was baking cookies, the image of Gu Tingyao grabbing Rao Zhenghao's head and banging it against his head yesterday kept appearing in her mind. He looked scary at that time, but he was also her savior. She didn't know how to thank him, but she always felt that she should do something. So she plucked up the courage to give him the cookies she had baked herself. In the past, she would bring homemade cookies to the company as snacks, but this was the first time she gave them to Gu Tingyao. Whether he likes it or not, it's her intention after all. Now seeing Gu Tingyao's obvious dislike, Wen Qingli felt a little embarrassed. She said, "If you don't like it, I'll take it away." "Forget it." Gu Tingyao said, "Leave it there." His tone seemed forced. But Wen Qingli finally breathed a sigh of relief. She nodded, turned and left, closing the office door after she went out. Gu Tingyao was the only one left in the office. He stared at the computer screen intently, as if he didn't care at all about the cookies that Wen Qingli had just handed over. After a few minutes, he glanced at the box next to him. After a while, he reached out, took the box inside himself, and opened it. The aroma of biscuits filled the air immediately. Inside the box, small oval-shaped cookies were neatly arranged. Gu Tingyao suddenly remembered that 5 years ago, when Wen Qingli had just joined the president's office, he once saw her sitting at her workstation munching on cookies. He asked her what she was eating. Wen Qingli was frightened, thinking that she was not allowed to eat at her workstation. She stammered for a long time before saying that she was eating biscuits. Wen Qingli graduated early, he was only 20 years old at that time, his clear big eyes were full of panic. At that time, he thought this little girl was really silly, but after entering the office, he couldn't help but be curious about what the cookies Wen Qingli ate tasted like. This curiosity lasted for 5 years. Over the past 5 years, he has witnessed Wen Qingli grow from immaturity to maturity, and from an ordinary assistant to his chief secretary. She handles work matters with ease and does not panic easily when encountering problems. But the only thing that hasn't changed in these 5 years is that she still brings homemade cookies to the company from time to time. After 5 years of taking care of it, today she finally knew to give him some to try. Then Gu Tingyao despised himself in his heart again. Why does it seem like he is short of these cookies? He wanted to close the box, but looking at the cookies in the box, he reached out his hand, picked up one, and took a bite. A little sweet and very fragrant. Gu Tingyao has never liked sweets, but this little cookie is just what he likes. He ate while working, and after a while, he had eaten all the cookies in the box. Gu Tingyao's attention was still on the computer. He stretched out his hand but touched nothing. He turned around and found that the cookies in the box were gone. He frowned, looking a little unhappy. This is all the cookies Wen Qingli gave him? No matter how unhappy he was, he couldn't possibly ask Wen Qingli for it. At this time, the internal phone rang. Gu Tingyao answered it, and Wen Qingli's businesslike voice came out from the inside. "Mr. Gu, Mr. G is here." Who else but Ji Hanju could be the Mr. G who dared to come to the company to see him without an appointment? Gu Tingyao was getting annoyed, so he said, "Let him go." Wen Qingli stopped talking, but Ji Hanzhou's nonchalant voice rang out, "Gu Tingyao, you actually asked me to get out, do you have any heart?" Before Gu Tingyao could say anything, the office door was pushed open. The person who walked in was Ji Hanju, who was wearing a pink shirt. Although it was such a flashy color, it didn't look out of place on him at all. "We've known each other for more than 20 years, and you want me to get out?" Ji Hanju covered his chest with his hands and looked hurt as he entered the room. Have you forgotten how I reached out to catch you without hesitation when you fell from a tree when you were 8 years old? Isn't this brotherhood touching enough? Did you get it? Gu Tingyao asked in a cold voice. Ahem, you were young at that time and couldn't run slowly. So when you were recovering at home, didn't I personally make soup for you every day? It would have been better if he didn't mention it, but as soon as he mentioned Gu Tingyao, he remembered those dark years. Ji Hanju was the same age as him. They were both 8 years old that year. But for some reason, Ji Hanju fell in love with cooking at such a young age and she even made soup for him every day. Even dogs would hate the soup that Ji Hanju cooked, but he couldn't bear to hurt Ji Hanju's feelings, so he drank it all. Thinking about it now, he still feels a little nauseous. What are you doing here at this time? Gu Tingyao asked. Of course I have business to do with you. Ji Hanju usually looks sloppy and unserious, but he is also very decisive when it comes to business. Now he is in charge of more than half of the Ji family's business. The Gu family and the Ji family have cooperated a lot. They are good brothers and make money together. What business? Ji Hanju smiled evilly and asked, You've been trying to get Shanghai International recently, right? Gu Tingyao remained silent. Regarding the previous new product incident, no matter who leaked the secrets to Shanghai International, it is a fact that Shanghai International used their new product to be the first to be launched on the market. Gu Tingyao had just said some time ago that Gu's would never cooperate with Shanghai International, and now they are doing this, clearly intending to slap the face of Gu's group. Who is Gu Tingyao? How could he swallow this? From now on, Shanghai International will definitely have no good days. They want to buy a piece of land, but I also like that piece of land. Ji Hanju said, You find a way to help me get it. Okay. Gu Tingyao said. Ji Hanju smiled and asked, You didn't even ask me what benefit I can give you, and you just agreed to it. That's really nice of you. No need to ask. Gu Tingyao said calmly, If I'm not satisfied with the benefits you give me, I'll tear your head off. In fact, no matter whether Ji Hanju gives him benefits or not, he will help his brothers if they need help. And he was going to take action anyway. Even if Ji Hanju didn't let him help, he would not let Shanghai International get what it wanted. TSK, that's scary. Ji Hanju shuddered, his eyes suddenly falling on the small box beside him. What is that? Yao, when did you become so girly? Chapter 33 He eats it all. It's no wonder that Ji Hanju noticed the small box, mainly because the box was pink, so pink and tender that it didn't match Gu Tingyao at all. As Ji Hanju was about to come over to take a look, Gu Tingyao immediately picked up the small box and put it in the drawer. Ji Hanju looked surprised. Huh, it's just a box, why are you protecting it so tightly, even I won't see it. Wait, it's a pink box, and you're protecting it so tightly, could it be a gift from a woman? Gu Tingyao didn't say anything, and Ji Hanju continued to talk to himself, Let me think about it, the woman who can send you something. Oh, I know, it must be Wen. Shut up. Gu Tingyao interrupted him coldly, We've finished talking, you can leave now. Come on, you're sending me away when I just got here. I haven't even sat down yet. Gu Tingyao thought that if he kicked him, he would warm up. Are you busy today? If not, let's have lunch together at noon. Ji Hanju said, Call the others to come along. I heard that Shuangya Pavilion has recently launched some new dishes. Why don't we go and try them? Yeah. Gu Tingyao didn't refuse. Okay, Secretary Wen, would you like to come with you? Ji Hanju asked with a smile. Gu Tingyao didn't say anything, just looked at him quietly. Even Ji Hanju felt uneasy at the sight of him, and quickly raised his hands in surrender. Okay, I won't ask any more questions, okay. You continue to be busy, I'm leaving, I'll wait for you at Frost Leaf Pavilion at noon. After saying that, Ji Hanju turned and left. After he left the office, Wen Qingli stood up out of courtesy and said to him politely, Goodbye, Mr. Ji. Usually, other people call Ji Hanju Mr. Ji outside, and Wen Qingli follows suit. However, in the company, she still calls him Mr. Ji, which sounds more formal. Ji Hanju sighed and said, Secretary Wen, why are you always so polite to me? Wen Qingli didn't respond, but just smiled politely. Ji Hanju rolled his eyes and said, I have always regarded you as a friend, so you don't have to be so polite to me. You sent something to a Yao, why don't you send me one? Wen Qingli was stunned for a moment. But think about it, Ji Hanju is Gu Tingyao's childhood friend. He must have just walked into the office casually, so it is not difficult for him to see the cookies she sent. After thinking for a while, Wen Qingli said politely, I still have some cookies here, would you like to try some? Ji Hanju thought to himself that it was really sent by Wen Qingli, and he also sent some biscuits. Wait, biscuits? There was a trace of surprise on his face. He just saw that Gu Tingyao's box was empty. So Gu Tingyao ate all the cookies Wen Qingli gave him? He grew up with Gu Tingyao. It seemed that Gu Tingyao had not eaten this kind of thing since he was 6 years old. He ate everything Wen Qingli gave him? Mr. Ji. Wen Qingli saw Ji Hanju's expression and was a little confused. What's wrong with you? Ji Hanju came back to his senses and said with a smile, nothing, Secretary Wen, you go ahead and do your work. I'm leaving now. After saying that, he glanced at the door of Gu Tingyao's office again and turned to leave. Wen Qingli always felt that Ji Hanju's smile before he left seemed a little cunning. Why is that? But she didn't want to worry about it, so she sat down and continued working. At the same time, at the gate of GU Group, Wen Xiaoyan looked at the two bodyguards in front of her and begged desperately. Just let me in, I really am from the CEO's office. Wen Xiaoyan was extremely anxious. She originally thought that she could destroy Wen Qingli and let Gu Tingyao drive Wen Qingli out of the GU Group so that she could take his place. Unexpectedly, now she couldn't even enter the door of GU Group. Brothers, I'm going to be late for work and my salary will be deducted. Will you compensate me? Wen Xiaoyan said in a joking tone with a stiff face. One of the bodyguards said coldly, sorry, we have received orders not to let you step into the door of GU Group. Order? Whose order? Wen Xiaoyan's eyes darkened. Was it Wen Qingli? The bodyguard just said this and ignored her again. Wen Xiaoyan hesitated for a while, but seeing that there was still no way, she had to turn around and leave. Her face was filled with anger, but her heart was filled with panic. After Gu Tingyao took Wen Qingli away last night, they originally wanted to send Rao Zhenghao to their hospital, but suddenly a group of people rushed in and took Rao Zhenghao away. Judging from the posture of that group of people, they are not ordinary people. Most of them are Gu Tingyao's men. What if Gu Tingyao gave her to Wen Qingli to vent his anger? She came to the company today just to find out what was going on. I didn't expect that I couldn't even get into the company's door. If Gu Tingyao attacked her, she would definitely be powerless to resist and would probably not even know how she died. The more Wen Xiaoyan thought about it, the more panicked she became. She could only curse at Wen Qingli to hide her inner panic. Just then, a car stopped beside her. Wen Xiaoyan stopped cursing and turned to look over suspiciously. The car window was rolled down, and the person sitting inside was Du Xian. Who are you? Wen Xiaoyan frowned and asked suspiciously. You and I have a common enemy. Du Xian smiled, let's get in the car first, and let's have a good chat. Wen Xiaoyan became alert, but then she noticed that it was a luxury car. Would someone who could ride in such a luxury car come over and try to take advantage of her? Moreover, this woman just told her that they had a common enemy, could it be Wen Qingli? When Xiaoyan's heart moved, she opened the car door and got in. After the car door closed, Du Xian told the driver in front, go to the tea house. The driver responded and drove away. When Xiaoyan asked, who are you? What do you want from me? You said we have a common enemy, who is it? Her continuous questioning made Du Xian feel unhappy. She was the daughter of the Du family, so how could she have the turn to be questioned by such a little bastard? But when she thought about how she could get Wen Xiaoyan to do many things, she suppressed her dissatisfaction and said with a smile, my name is Du Xian. She wanted to show off her identity as the daughter of the Du family, but Wen Xiaoyan had never heard of her, so she asked expressionlessly, and then? What's the conflict between you and Wen Qingli? Du Xian asked instead of answering. Wen Xiaoyan was delighted. It seems that the common enemy that Du Xian mentioned is indeed Wen Qingli. She can afford such a luxury car and has a driver, so her identity must be extraordinary. With such an ally, it will definitely be much easier to deal with Wen Qingli. Wen Xiaoyan rolled her eyes and painstakingly made up some stories about how she was bullied by Wen Qingli when she was a child. Du Xian seemed to have found an outlet for her anger and said through gritted teeth, I knew that Wen Qingli was definitely not a good person. She doesn't deserve to live in this world. I finally got into Gu's group through my own efforts, but Wen Qingli tripped me up and kicked me out. Now I can't even get through the door of Gu's group. Wen Xiaoyan said with tears in her eyes, Ms. Du, what do you think I should do now? Chapter 34 Too Sweet. Du Xian patted the back of her hand and said in a comforting tone, don't worry, let's go to the tea house and have some tea and talk slowly. People like her must be dealt with properly, only then will we feel relieved. At noon, Gu Tingyao went to have lunch with Ji Hanju and the others. Wen Qingli didn't order any food and went to the company cafeteria with Anna. The GU Group S employee cafeteria is large, has a wide variety of food, and most importantly, is all free. In terms of employee benefits, GU Group has always done a good job. Wen Qingli got a bowl of beef rice noodles and found a table to sit down with Anna. Two people from the Human Resources Department saw Wen Qingli and wanted to get close to her, so they brought their meals and sat down at their table. Secretary Wen is also coming to the cafeteria to eat today. It feels like I haven't seen you in a while. Wen Qingli smiled and greeted them. It was inevitable to talk about gossip during the meal. One of the women said, did you know? Our deputy director was fired. Wen Qingli's heart moved. The deputy director of the Human Resources Department, is he Rao Zhenghao's father, Rao Wenshan? Is this true? Anna was surprised. Deputy Director Rao? Why so sudden? What did he do wrong? I don't know yet, but he's definitely been fired. He didn't come to the company this morning, and the news of his firing has spread throughout our department. I guess their whole company will be informed this afternoon. TSK. Anna sighed. He was a high-ranking executive of GU Group yesterday, but he was fired today. Life is really unpredictable. Who says it's not true? I don't know what he did wrong. We are all in the same department, and we haven't heard anything about it. I asked the director, but he didn't know either. After saying that, the three of them looked at Wen Qingli at the same time. Wen Qingli had just had a sip of the rice noodle soup when he saw this and asked with a smile, why are you all looking at me? Secretary Wen, you've been by Mr. Gu's side the whole time, haven't you heard any news? A colleague asked. Hey, as the deputy director of the HR department, if a company executive is fired, Mr. Gu must have made the decision, right? Wen Qingli recalled the scene of Gu Tingyao teaching Rao Zhenghao a lesson last night. It is not difficult for Gu Tingyao to find out Rao Zhenghao's family background. What happened last night, and Rao Wenshan was fired today? Could it be that Gu Tingyao did this for her? If it were in the past, she would definitely think it was impossible. But thinking about how Gu Tingyao looked last night, she felt that perhaps it was really just as she thought. Seeing that the other three were still staring at her intently, she had no choice but to say, I haven't heard Mr. Gu mention it. Firstly, she was not sure whether it was because of her, and secondly, she really did not want to tell anyone about what happened last night. Well, I don't know what the new deputy director will be like. I hope it's a handsome guy, or a beautiful girl, but not a wretched old man like Rao Wenshan. The other three were discussing heatedly, but Wen Qingli did not join in the discussion. She ate her rice noodles silently, thinking about Gu Tingyao alone. At this time, Gu Tingyao had already arrived at Frost Leaf Tower. Almost everyone had arrived in the private room. As soon as he entered, Ji Hanju stretched his neck to look behind him. Seeing that there was no one behind him, Ji Hanju immediately curled his lips in disappointment. Ayao, why didn't you bring Secretary Wen with you? Gu Tingyao was too lazy to pay attention to him, and someone else joked, what's going on? Are Yao and Secretary Wen finally fell in love with each other? The phrase, love grows over time, is well used. Gu Tingyao sat down and said calmly, don't make fun of her. Since he said this, no one else dared to talk nonsense and changed the subject. Hurry up and ask the waiter to serve the food. I don't know how the new dishes taste. I'm tired of this place. If it weren't for the new dishes, I really wouldn't want to come here. Ji Hanju joked, is it because I didn't find some beauties to accompany you that you can't eat? Hey, brother Ju still understands me. Everyone at the table was chatting and laughing, and soon the waiter brought all the dishes. One of the new dishes is a snack that looks like a cookie at first glance. Ji Hanju chuckled and immediately passed the dish to Gu Tingyao. I'm telling you, this dish belongs to Yao today, no one is allowed to snatch it from him. Why? Someone didn't understand. I remember Brother Yao never liked this kind of sweets, right? Alas, that was in the past. Ji Hanju said with a profound look. Now, his taste has changed. He loves to eat these sweets, especially biscuits. Gu Tingyao raised his foot to kick him. Ji Hanju dodged immediately as if he had expected it. Really? Then no one should compete with Brother Yao for this dish today. Others also joked. Gu Tingyao smiled and said, "It's a deal, if anyone wants to eat, they have to ask me first." When everyone saw that he could still joke with them like this, they knew that he was in a good mood. Gu Tingyao was indeed in a good mood. He picked up a piece of dessert, took a bite, then suddenly frowned again, put the dessert on his plate, and didn't touch it again. Why? Ji Hanju asked again in a mean way. Not to your taste. Too sweet, said Gu Tingyao. Then I understand. The cook is made by secretary Wen must not be that sweet. Otherwise, why did you eat them all? In fact, the sweetness of this snack is similar to the cookies made by Wen Qingli. But Gu Tingyao just felt that this tasted bad. It was far inferior to what Wen Qingli made. Why are you talking so much today? Gu Tingyao asked. Then you're wrong. When am I not talkative? Ji Hanju said, I can tell from the looks of it that you don't care about me. Gu Tingyao looked disgusted by him, and Ji Hanju said, okay, I won't play tricks on you anymore. Just then, Gu Tingyao's cell phone rang. He picked it up and saw that it was a call from Mr. Gu. My grandpa is calling. I'm going to go out and answer it. You guys eat first. After saying that, Gu Tingyao stood up and walked out of the private room. Grandfather. Are Yao? Old Master Gu said with a smile, have you eaten? I'm eating. Are you? I just finished eating. Rao Wenshan called me this morning and said you were going to send him to jail. Is that true? Well, he made a mistake. Gu Tingyao said, I told him that if he doesn't want to go to jail, he can go to country F. It's his choice. Since he made the mistake, I won't care about it. However, with Rao Wenshan's dismissal, the position of Deputy Director of the Human Resources Department in the group is vacant. I thought, let your third brother take over. The person Mr. Gu was talking about was Gu Tingyao, the son of Gu Tingyao's third uncle. He graduated from college this year, so it's time for him to go to a company and gain some experience. Chapter 35 Little Puppy. After all, Gu Tingyao is a member of the Gu family and Mr. Gu's grandson, so no one would say anything if he became the Deputy Director of the Human Resources Department. Moreover, the children of the Gu family have been learning about various company matters since